Husband's intense revenge after discovering his wife's cheating with her best friend's husband. When my wife and I arrived at the Halloween party, it was already lively. It was hard not to notice her fit physique, showcased by her tight jet black Catwoman outfit. Despite being a mom of two, Alicia looked stunning. Sometimes I forget just how attractive she is. I, on the other hand, was dressed as a pirate. Hot? Not really, but not too shabby either. Alicia gave me a quick kiss on the cheek before mingling with other guests while I made my way to the drinks area, where my friends were engaged in a heated debate. As I approached, I realized they were arguing over the age-old question, Hulk or Superman? It struck me as a bit silly, considering the intellect in the room. Superman was obviously the superior choice. Nevertheless, I decided to join the debate, drawing from my childhood spent immersed in Marvel and DC comics. Confident in my expertise, I hoped to settle the matter once and for all. However, my arguments only fueled the debate further, turning the conversation into chaos. But that's what happens when you mix beer with grown men. Eventually, we all agreed to table the discussion, opting instead to enjoy the abundance of beer and fun. Knowing Alicia wouldn't want to leave anytime soon, I planned to stay relatively sober. She was already having a great time chatting with her best friend, Susie, who was also dressed as Catwoman. Alicia and Susie had been inseparable since middle school. Despite being almost polar opposites in personality, they shared the same upbringing, often jokingly speculating about being switched at birth. However, they both detested that joke. Susie was married to Dominic, who was quite different from me in many ways. While I managed restaurants for a living, Dominic worked with his hands. Though I wasn't as active in the gym as I used to be, I still maintained a decent level of fitness from my boxing days in college. Dominic, however, works at a nearby factory. While I'm unsure of his specific role, I know it entails heavy lifting for 8 to 10 hours daily. He's practically a gym rat, resulting in a muscular physique. Unlike my neat short hair, his is long and tied back in a ponytail, complemented by a beard, giving him an Aztec warrior vibe. If Dominic resembles Drogo from Game of Thrones, I'm more akin to Don Draper from Mad Men. Though I never truly warmed up to him, I didn't dislike him either. Our connection was merely through Susie, my wife's best friend, so our interactions were sporadic and never extended beyond that. And tonight was no exception. Sporting a Tarzan costume in chilly weather struck me as insensitive. I couldn't help but perceive it as an idiot move, reflecting his tendency for such actions. Despite his flirtatious behavior, which often bordered on inappropriate, the women, including Alicia, seemed to find it more amusing than offensive. This bothered me, especially considering Susie's apparent indifference. While she occasionally playfully chided him, there was no real reprimand, suggesting she took pride in his ability to attract attention. As the night progressed and Dominic's inhibitions lowered with drink consumption, his flirtatiousness became more pronounced, regardless of the women's marital status. Though some husbands may have been angered by his advances, no one reacted, perhaps out of fear, intoxication, or a desire to avoid confrontation. However, I remained vigilant, ready to intervene if he crossed a line with Alicia. Sensing my unease, she approached me. "Are you enjoying yourself, Greg?" she shouted over the music. I nodded and took a sip of beer, observing her move to the music. Standing beside me, her attention shifted to Tarzan, silently appraising his physique. Unintentionally, I felt a surge of jealousy as I sensed her desire. It bothered me. "Who dresses as Tarzan in this weather?" Alicia snapped back to reality and faced me. "You know Dominic, sweetheart, always craving the spotlight." I chuckled, but the taste of my beer suddenly soured. Alicia noticed my shift in mood. "Are you jealous?" she asked. "Jealous of him?" "I don't need to strip down to get attention," I replied, my tone defensive. Alicia laughed it off. "Of course not, honey," she said, turning her attention back to him. As the night progressed and more drinks flowed, inhibitions waned. Dominic and his loincloth became less of a focus as I mingled with my genuine friends. It wasn't until later that I noticed Dominic making advances towards Alicia. Searching for her, I found them in the kitchen, engaged in an intimate conversation. My jealousy flared, and Dominic retreated upon seeing me. Alicia, sensing the tension, greeted me with forced warmth. "Hi, darling, I was just looking for you," she hurriedly said. "I've been in the same place all night, Alicia. What were you two talking about?" "You looked awfully cozy," I asked, my tone accusatory. She tried to dismiss it. "Nothing happened, Greg. Dominic was just being his usual flirty self," she assured, but my unease lingered. "I'm just a bit tipsy, honey. Don't worry," she said, patting my cheek before leaving. For the rest of the evening, Dominic and Alicia kept their distance, exchanging only secret glances. It was enough to unsettle me. I needed a break. The beer was kicking in, so I needed a bathroom break. Afterward, I bumped into Dominic as if he had trailed me. "Got a problem, Greg?" he slurred, his gaze menacing. "What?" I felt the surrealness of the moment. He accused me of looking down on him due to my wealth, inciting superiority. It puzzled me. "You're drunk, Dominic. Go home before you say something you'll regret," I said, moving past him. "Regret what? Like sleeping with your pretty wife?" He jabbed, grabbing my attention. I confronted him, warning him to keep my wife out of his twisted thoughts. He smirked, dismissing them as memories, not fantasies. His words struck me like thunder, ending the conversation. "You're full of it," I retorted, less certain now. Then he made crude remarks about Alicia, crossing a line. Enraged, I struck him, the impact echoing through the drywall. Descending the stairs, I found Alicia, her tear-filled eyes confirming Dominic's claims. Panic ensued as Dominic lay unconscious. Amid the chaos, Alicia approached me, her question frozen on her lips. A glance told her I knew. Her teary eyes confirmed Dominic's words. "Call emergency! Dominic's unconscious!" she cried. Screams echoed from above, but I stood there, looking at Alicia, searching for the woman I married. Honestly, I didn't care about Dominic's fate at that moment. "What the hell did you do to my husband?" A scream pierced the air behind me, followed by fists punching my back. I dodged Susie's swings and someone pulled her away. "Greg, what the hell?" Richard, the party host, questioned, noticing the chaos. Ignoring him, I faced Susie. "Did you know your husband slept with Alicia?" Her silence spoke volumes, confirming her knowledge. Without anger or denial, she just looked at me as if she knew everything. Alicia's hand rested gently on my shoulder. "Greg, we need to talk, but not here," she said softly. I turned to her, unleashing a surge of rage unlike any I'd felt before. It was so intense, tears welled in my eyes, a release of emotion preventing me from exploding. "He woke up!" A shout echoed from above. Susie hurried back upstairs. My anger began to fade as the gravity of the situation sank in. What if I had eliminated Dominic in a moment of anger? I could face lifelong consequences, even assault charges, jeopardizing my hard-earned career over a drunken mistake. The same drunken mistake who slept with my wife. "Greg, come on, honey, let's get out of here. We need to talk," Alicia pleaded. "No, Alicia, you're going home with your boyfriend and his wife." "I'm leaving," I retorted, heading for the front door. Alicia grabbed me in desperation. "Greg, you can't leave me here. We're going home and we're going to talk. Do you hear me? You're not leaving me behind," she cried, her face streaked with tears, a mix of fury and sadness. It made no sense what she was angry about. "I can't handle this, Alicia. Don't go home. I could end up in jail for assault." "I don't want to add domestic violence to the mix." "Damn you, Greg, damn you. Want to punch me? Go ahead, coward. At least you'll acknowledge me." "Damn, it'd be the first time you've touched me in weeks," she jabbed, her finger into my chest as her anger escalated, leaving me puzzled by its intensity. She was the one in the wrong, yet she was furious. "Is that it? Because I don't cuddle you every night? Is that your lame excuse? Is that why you cheated with this idiot?" She didn't respond verbally, her defiant glare spoke volumes. "Just so you know, Alicia, I earn a living. I don't have a husband to pay my bills. Maybe if you had a job, you'd understand what it's like to come home exhausted." Suddenly, I remembered our audience, hanging on every word like they were watching a movie. Alicia was mocking me. Poor Greg, too tired for his wife, yet finds time for adult movies. Maybe if you paid attention to your wife instead of silicone Barbie dolls online, she wouldn't confide in her friend about feeling neglected. Alicia's voice crescendoed, fists clenched, tears streaming down her face, a mix of pain and fury. It was the ultimate humiliation. I had no witty retort or comeback. Speechless, I faced the judgmental stares of our friends and neighbors, shock, disgust, sympathy, and perhaps a hint of entertainment. I had to leave. Alicia's cries of despair echoed until I started the car and drove off into the night. This story, based on real events, is not from Greg's perspective, but mine, Richard, the party host. Yes, I have a hole the size of Dominic's next to my daughter's room. Writing from Greg's viewpoint allowed readers to feel his anger and humiliation. My wife and I discussed it extensively. It's like watching a train wreck, you can't look away. Susie's lack of anger when Greg disclosed Alicia's affair with Dominic indicated she was already aware. Was it a ménage à trois or another scenario? Frankly, a ménage à trois involving them would rival any adult movie. How long had this been going on? I also noticed the exchanged looks between Alicia and Dominic at the party, suggesting something more. Maybe I'm overanalyzing, but maybe not. It was evident Greg was neglecting Alicia carnally, perhaps in other aspects too. Was this an excuse for her infidelity? I doubt it. Does it explain why she cheated? Certainly. Women whose advances are consistently rebuffed may be more tempted to have an affair, especially if the husband shows interest in other women or watches adult movies, which can be seen as a form of betrayal. By the way, Alicia is incredibly attractive in real life. In my opinion, any man would find her irresistible. But this reinforces the saying that for every beautiful woman, there's a man tired of having lovemaking with her. The crucial question is what happens next. Currently, the four of them are keeping silent about the situation, but it's only a matter of time before it comes out. While this story is based on true events, I didn't witness everything and had to take creative liberties, especially with Greg's inner thoughts. I sympathize with him and the tough choices he faces. Alicia treated him unfairly, regardless of her reasons. I'm uncertain whether reconciliation or divorce is the best path. Full disclosure, I'm somewhat biased, as Greg is a friend of mine. And about Superman and the Hulk, I side with Greg. Superman's powers like thermal vision, flight, and super speed would easily defeat the Hulk, unless there's kryptonite involved. But that's beside the point. Mr. Kieran, they're calling you on line 1. Who is it, Betty? Mr. Ford is calling for you, sir.
Greg called me. I've been trying to reach him since the Halloween incident.
Until now, he, his wife, and their lovers remained silent, but there have been so many questions. How could something like this not happen? The public showdown was so dramatic, with elements of lovemaking, violence, and betrayal, and the epic confrontation between David and Goliath. Except this time, Goliath had a glass jaw and wrote a check his drunk self couldn't cash, and David cashed it out of genuine hatred. Patch him through, Betty. Sir, he seems a bit upset. Well, yes, his wife did publicly humiliate him. If he weren't upset, I'd be concerned. Thank you, Betty. I'll handle it. I awaited the click indicating I was connected to Greg. Hey, Greg, it's Richard. I've been trying to reach you since. I couldn't bring myself to say these words out loud. Ever since I found out about my wife sleeping with that bleep. Yeah, I needed some time to process everything, Greg replied, his voice still carrying the simmering anger beneath his composed tone. Even over the phone, his emotions were palpable. So, do you want to talk about it? I asked, hearing a chuckle from him on the other end, tinged with bitterness. It almost sounded like a snort. Why would I want to talk to you, Richard, huh, buddy? So you can broadcast it online? Does your little story need a sequel? Are people dying to know what happened next to the guy who couldn't satisfy his wife? Can't your eager fans just wait to see how my damn life unfolds? Fine, he had read my narrative. Now, not only was he furious at his cheating wife, her deceitful friend, and her caveman lover, but he was also angry with me. Fantastic. Greg and I were high school buddies. He played baseball, I played football. Despite losing touch after school, him off to college. Me joining the Air Force. We reconnected when I returned to our hometown years later. He'd landed a management job at Olive Garden. I teased him about wasting his college degree, but he persisted and quickly climbed the ranks, eventually becoming a district manager overseeing multiple restaurants, earning almost as much as me. Now my dear friend was seething at me. Not good. Greg, usually I'd crack a joke to diffuse tension, but in this case it would only make things worse. I especially liked the ending, I began, but he cut me off. I had no choice but to shut up and listen. You know, where I tucked my tail between my legs and ran off like a coward. Nice touch, his words dripped with sarcasm, leaving me feeling like a terrible friend, utterly defenseless. Greg, where are you? We need to talk, I urged. You know what's funny, Richard? I've suddenly become quite the popular guy these days, more so than ever. Before, seems like everyone wants a chat with me. Must be my charming personality, he quipped, his voice slurring slightly. I could hear the clinks of liquid pouring into a glass. Greg, are you drunk? I asked, concerned. No, Richard, I was drunk an hour ago. Can't tell you who I am now, he retorted sarcastically. All right, I admit it. I was a lousy friend, but I'm here to make it right. Where are you, Greg? I said hastily, grabbing my coat and keys, momentarily forgetting my work obligations. Screw you, Richard. Not telling you where I am. Don't you dare show up at this bar. I'll mess you up if you do, he warned before the line went dead. But I didn't need him to tell me. I knew exactly where he was. There were only a handful of bars in town worth going to, and Greg had his favorite, at Moe's. Partly because he had a thing for the cute bartender there. She was the type who could flirt and seem unattainable at the same time, which only added to her allure. Yet, despite her charm, she wasn't busy when I walked in. My heart sank, seeing Greg alone at the bar, the sole patron in the place. Checking my watch, I realized it was just past noon. Karen, the bartender, greeted me with a wave, her eyes showing concern. "Does this handsome guy belong to you?" she teased, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I nodded subtly, gesturing for her to give us some privacy with a tilt of my head towards Greg. It was all I managed before his fist connected with my face, sending me reeling and seeing stars. No wonder Dominic ended up in bad shape. Before I knew it, I was on the floor wiping blood from my lip as Greg glared down at me. Eventually, he shook his head and returned to the bar stool. I picked myself up, signaling to Karen to keep quiet as I made my way over to Greg before he noticed me again. She stood before us, eyes wide as saucers. As she started to approach, I silently waved and nodded, signaling that it was all right. In response, she nodded back and resumed clearing tables. "Now that that's settled, can we talk?" I asked, mustering up courage as I sat down beside him. He took another sip of his beer and shook his head. "Off the record?" he quipped sarcastically. I chuckled inwardly. At least his sense of humor was intact. "Anyway, you really hit a nerve there," he said with disdain. "How's your relationship with your mom? You've met her, right?" "Yeah, I still remember her frisking me to make sure I didn't bring any forbidden stuff into her house." We laughed about it later, Greg recounted, taking another sip before meeting my gaze. "For God's sake, Richard, it was bad enough going through that, then reading about it and knowing all my friends knew it was me." "Greg, I just pinned it down. I never meant to embarrass you, and besides, no one will even know it's you," I tried to reassure both him and myself. 2 cats, Tarzan, and a pirate, plus the pirate who tossed Tarzan into the wall. How many damn Halloween parties do you think that's happened at? Most of them are the same. Greg looked like he wanted to punch me again. "You find this funny?" Okay, humor was definitely not the way to go. "You're right, Greg. I was an idiot. I genuinely apologize for putting you in that spot." "Well, I'm not sorry for punching you," he retorted. I rubbed my chin and chuckled. "You still punch like a girl. No wonder you always got your backside kicked in boxing." That seemed to break the tension, and it continued to thaw. I managed to coax him away from Moe's and into my car. Karen shot me a grateful look and hugged me as we left. "Take care of him, Richard. He's going through a lot," she said. My jaw was throbbing and beginning to swell, but I got Greg out of there, and that was what mattered most. The moment I secured him into my passenger seat, he drifted off, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Instead of heading to his mom's, I drove him to my place. Along the way, I called another friend, John. "How's it going, Richie Rich?" He greeted me cheerfully as he answered the phone. John was one of those guys who still acted like he was in his 22nd. A great guy, though quite immature. I emphasize very, since most guys are at least a little immature. He's the one who sparked the whole Hulk versus Superman debate, always the life of the party. However, none of the wives really want their husbands to be under his influence. He had a knack for bringing out the teenage troublemaker in his friends, but we all love him. "John, I need your hand. I found Greg at Moe's, soused as hell. Brought him back here and laid him out in the basement," I explained. "Damn, glad you tracked him down. Been looking for him all week after what that idiot did to him. It's a miracle he didn't do something drastic." John parked his Mustang behind my Tahoe in my driveway, and together we tackled the task of moving 200 lbs of dead weight onto the couch in my basement. Not an easy feat. After chatting for a bit, he headed out with the promise that I'd keep him updated. Being home early meant I had the house all to myself, which was a rarity. So rare, in fact, that I found myself at a loss for what to do. Didn't want to step out in case Greg woke up disoriented, so I fired up the George Foreman grill for steak and baked some potatoes. Then I flipped through my cable sports package, hoping to catch a good game, or at least some interesting sports talk. Settled on a documentary and dug into my meal. It wasn't long before my wife, Nikki, walked in with our kids in tow. "Hey, what brings you home so early?" she asked, planting a kiss on my cheek. The kids scampered upstairs. "Found Greg at Moe's, soused as hell. Brought him back here and laid him out in the basement," I explained. She looked hesitant. "Are you sure that's a good idea? I don't want any drunken antics in front of the kids." "He'll be fine, sweetheart. I'll keep an eye on him," I assured her, feeling her hand caress my cheek, sending a shiver down my spine. That's when she noticed the swelling. "Richard, what the hell? Did he do this?" "I'm all right, honey. Don't worry about it." "Rich, get him out of here." "Honey, everything's under control. The poor guy just found out his wife was cheating on him a few weeks back and it happened so public. He's on edge. Plus, he's been dealing with it all alone. I'm his friend. He needed an outlet for his pent-up anger, and if that meant taking some hits, I didn't mind. Besides, my jaw is not as fragile as Tarzan's. Maybe he should consider a different costume next year." Nikki couldn't help but chuckle at that. Watching Tarzan get his backside kicked by a pirate was pretty amusing. I doubt Jane would approve. Yeah, Tarzan definitely got what was coming to him. Dominic should spend less time pumping iron and more time hitting the bag, Nikki quipped. Or at least learn to dodge, she added. We shared a laugh. Once her giggles subsided, one thing I've always admired about Nikki is her personality and sense of humor. It's one of the reasons why I can't stay angry with her for too long. I headed downstairs to check on Greg. His thunderous snoring assured me he was still very much alive, albeit functionally comatose. I slipped a pillow under his head when he let out a sound that could wake the dead. His drink's breath could have knocked out a bull. What the heck, Greg? I muttered. The stench clinging to me, I needed to step away. A few hours later, a zombie-like version of my friend emerged from the abyss. His bloodshot eyes screamed exhaustion and distress as he shuffled around my kitchen. Nikki shot me a silent warning that spoke volumes. Keep him in line or he's out. I approached him in the kitchen. How you feeling, buddy? Feels like my wife cheated on me, humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood, then ran me over with a truck. At least your memory is intact. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. His eyes narrowed. My memory's fine. I remember your damn story too. Remember how you socked me in the face for it? I rubbed my tender jaw. That part seems fuzzy. Might need a repeat just to be sure. It's done. There was no real venom in his words. Despite his talk of wanting to punch me again, I knew he wouldn't. I've said it before, but I'm really sorry about that story, Greg. I didn't think it would reach as many people as it did, and I certainly didn't think you'd find out about it. I was wrong. People actually read it. I even got a message from this guy I know who heard about the party from someone and then read your story online. Who's this guy? You don't know him. He's this loudmouth named Harry from Virginia. I chuckled. Harry Ina, huh? Heard of him. Nice guy, once you get past his attitude. By the way, he's on my side. And thinks you're an idiot too, Greg said, grinning. Yeah, well, I'm sure he felt that way before reading the story I wrote about you, I replied. Greg nodded and chuckled. I gave him a friendly pat on the back, which he didn't seem to mind, confirming we were okay. Richard, why'd you have to paint me as a wimp? Did I really just bolt like that? Wimp? Greg, you took the guy down in one punch. I was half expecting you to bite his ear off. If you boxed like that in college, you'd have been a champ. No one sees you as weak. Screw you. It's a skill I've still got, idiot. He smirked and shook his head. I really handed him his rear, didn't I? Hell yeah, bet your sweet rear you couldn't pull that off, he teased, nudging me. Nah, might take me 2 hits, I quipped back, unable to stifle a chuckle. It was good to see Greg. So what went down after I split? Kept looking over my shoulder, thinking I was headed to the slammer. Well, Greg, after you bailed from the Halloween party, Alicia let out this wail like she was facing a firing squad and crumpled to the floor. She sobbed loudly like a broken Catwoman. Nikki rushed to her aid, helping her up and leading her to the couch. Susie, the other Catwoman, came down the stairs with her disgraced Tarzan, holding his head as she guided him. Alicia caught sight of them and flew into a rage. You idiot! What did you tell Greg? You've ruined my life, you idiot. Tarzan, already battered by the pirate, now dodged Catwoman's claws, while Catwoman 2 tried to intervene. Alicia, stop it! Cut it out! Susie yelled, defending her husband. Tarzan, being saved by a woman from a woman, only stoked his fire. Can this idiot embarrass the Jungle Man any further? You should have said something, right, you idiot? Couldn't take no for an answer. What's wrong with you? The Jungle Man regarded Alicia's fury with detachment. It was clear he hadn't grasped everything yet. The knockout must have sobered him up. He knew he'd caused today's pain. Alicia, I'm sorry. I was drunk, he said. She stopped attacking and collapsed to the floor again. What do I do now, Susie? What do I do now? Back to Richard's kitchen. After that, they had to haul Dominic to the ER. Turns out he had a concussion. He wanted to press charges, but Susie and Alicia talked him out of it. Alicia pleaded with him not to. She knew if you got arrested, there'd be little hope of your return. Greg chuckled and shook his head. In any case, there's little hope left for this. I sighed, nodding sadly. So Greg, what happened after you split? All we heard was the rubber hitting the road and the roar of your engine. I wanted to chase after you, but my Tahoe was packed with other cars. I feared you might crash. You haven't responded to any of our calls. Yeah, well, I needed to get away and think, you know? I couldn't wrap my head around it all. Our friends are looking at me, judging me. I needed space. So you headed to your mom's place? It must have been tough going back there. Yeah, well, life throws you curveballs sometimes. The only way to deal with it is to do something out of the ordinary. Greg, October 31st, party crap. Damn it. Damn it. These damn women. I sped recklessly alongside streets, leading out of town. Honestly, I had no clue where I was going. Stop signs, speed limits, traffic lights, none of it mattered. I drove like I was the only one on the road that mattered. What's that sound? I glanced at the passenger seat, recognizing Alicia's ringtone. Her lovely face illuminated my Android screen. She smiled at me, a loving smile captured in time. I remember taking this photo. I was so happy, so full of love and adoration. Damn, Lee. I fought the urge to chuck my phone out the window. Her picture on the screen lied to me. If I answered, the voice on the other end would lie to me. The cheerful melody announcing her call was a lie, lies. She slept with Dominic. Maybe they even kissed passionately, excitedly. Damn it, I bet the idiot loved it. Another man's wife in his bed. Who did he think he was? I was the one by her side when she was sick, in the delivery room with her twice, promising to love her in sickness and health. I devoted my life to her. The persistent ringtone tormented me with its falsehoods. I shut it off and pulled out the battery. Silence, no more lies. I drove aimlessly around the city, my mind on autopilot, protecting itself from overload. The images of tonight's events and, worse, the scenarios I imagined between my wife and that idiot in the jungle were overwhelming, my mind overclocking my processor. Reality hit me when I gazed up and found myself parked in front of my parents' garage. I couldn't recall driving here. It seemed my subconscious guided me back to my childhood abode. Cutting the engine, I entered. Every child holds a key to their parents' home, even if they vowed never to return. Well, perhaps not every child, but in my case, it was late. The living room, unchanged for decades, greeted me in darkness. The sofa, coffee table, lamp, all fixtures frozen in time, exactly as I remembered them. Strangely, I found solace in this familiarity. That night, in one drunken conversation with a Neanderthal, everything changed in an instant. I've always been skeptical of stories where worlds shift in a blink, except in tragedy. This night turned me into a believer. My entire understanding of life was upended by a single conversation. Returning to my childhood home brought a sense of stability after an earthquake shatters buildings and fractures the ground. In such times, people crave calmness. Stability was what I needed now. For the moment, I was safe at home. "Who's there?" My mom's voice rang out, envisioning her wielding a baseball bat, ready to fend off intruders. "It's me, Ma, Gregory." "Yes?" Suddenly, the light flicked on, momentarily blinding me. I squinted to shield my eyes. "Why on earth are you skulking around in the dark, trying to give me a heart attack?" "Glad to see you too, Mom." As my eyes adjusted, I faced an elderly lady, clad in floral pajamas, hair in curlers. "Why are you here at this hour? And what's with the idiotic outfit?" Straight to the point, that's my mother. In that moment, I realized I was still in most of my pirate costume. My hat, parrot, and eye patch were long gone. Now I just looked, well, like an idiot.
Long story, Ma.
"Listen, I'll be staying here for a while. The kids will leave tomorrow, but I'll be back. I'll fill you in, but not in front of them, okay?" I didn't ask her to stay with her. I simply informed her of my intentions. This might appear odd to most, but it's normal for us. My family isn't what you'd call affectionate. My dad is straightforward, never saying more than necessary and expecting the same in return. Hugs are brief. "I love you" is reserved for dire moments. My parents were a perfect match, both reserved in affection. How they even conceived me remains a puzzling mystery. They were either destined to find each other or destined to suffer alone. "All right, Gregory, you know where everything is. I'm going back to bed." My mom's frail figure vanished around the corner, her voice trailing. "And lock up." The next morning I checked my phone, finding 29 missed calls, 15 from Alicia, some from Richard, and a few from others at the party. I ignored them, knowing they'd likely consist of people eager for gossip about the affair. After a restless night, pain, anger, and confusion lingered. I also wondered about the police. What happened to Dominic after I left? Did he go to the hospital? Press charges? Would I end up in jail? I slipped out of the house before my mom woke, leaving a note explaining my departure. If Alicia called, Mom was instructed to inform her I'd reach out when ready. I parked near my favorite bar, seeking solace and strong drink to numb the pain. For the next couple of weeks, I hid at my mom's, only encountering Alicia when dropping off the kids or fetching belongings. Our interactions were strained, ending with her upset. Before leaving, I overheard her talking on the phone. Ears perking up, I listened. If it had been the creep, I would have lost it. But it was Susie, her half of the conversation leaving me unsure if it was better or worse. I divided my free time between my parents' place and the bar. With Dad away on business, it was just Mom and me. Oh joy. Deep conversations weren't her thing, though she listened attentively and offered support, even if she didn't fully grasp the situation. I'd never discuss adult films with her, especially after her warnings in my younger years about blindness and hairy palms. During my stay, we spoke little. I outlined why I was staying, and she listened but didn't press for details. When she asked what I'd do next, all I could do was shrug and admit I didn't know. "You'll figure it out," was her encouraging response. We didn't revisit the topic. Oddly comforting, it spared me from endless retelling and emotional coddling. I was free to grieve in my own way. Taking all my sick and personal days, I couldn't face anyone, even though no Kyo workers were at the party. Living in a small town, gossip spread like wildfire. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity, it was public humiliation. Poor Greg, too busy with obscene films to satisfy his wife. Eventually, I had to shut off my phone. It kept ringing incessantly, faces pleading for answers. Screw them all. Whether the universe or Dominic's pride intervened, the cops never came. It was intriguing to observe my friends' behavior. They sent emails and even calls, yet none visited my parents' house. I realized that when people are unsure what to say, they often avoid the situation altogether. They weren't neglectful friends, just unsure how to help. This silence, both a curse and a blessing, left me alone with my thoughts constantly. To quiet the disturbing images in my mind, I sought solace in drinks at the bar, with Karen becoming both my deity and my salvation. The hardest part about staying with my mother was being separated from my children. It was self-imposed exile, but it still stung. I knew seeing them meant facing Alicia, akin to reaching a warm bed across a half-frozen lake, so I drank even more to numb the pain. It took Karen showing me a story about catwomen, penned by a friend, to break the cycle. It mirrored my own script, featuring 2 catwomen, a pirate, that damn Tarzan, Superman, and Hulk. The nerve. Fuming, I dialed 7 digits. "Good morning, Mr. Caron's office. This is Betty. How can I help you today?" "Today at Richard's place. So, what's the plan with Alicia?" "Divorce, separation, give her a thrashing." Greg chuckled sadly and stared at his plate. "Do I have to choose?" he quipped, lacking enthusiasm. I saw the agony etched on his face, replaying Halloween's events in his mind, her words echoing like a broken record. "Greg, I've got to ask. You can tell me to buzz off if it's too personal, but about that adult film. What did she mean?" Greg blushed, shifting uncomfortably. "So what? I watch them occasionally, not every day." "Are you implying she doesn't, or you don't?" he retorted defensively. "Sure, I watch them, but Alicia said you were viewing them instead of being carnal with her. That's true?" "Buzz off, Richard. It's too personal." "All right, buddy, fair enough, but I just want to understand what went wrong. You two seemed so happy, I never suspected a thing." He gazed down at his meal while his fork traced circles on the plate. "She just doesn't get it, Rich." "What's she not getting?" Greg let his fork drop and ran his hands over his face, taking a deep breath with a sigh tinged with sadness, perhaps mixed with guilt. "I work 10 to 12 hours every day, sometimes even 5 days a week if I'm lucky. When I get home, I'm exhausted. I'm stressed out. I deal with irate investors, clients, managers, carnal molestation claims, discrimination claims, and everything in between. It all falls on my shoulders. If something goes wrong at the restaurants, like some customer claiming to have spotted a rat and demanding free food, I'm the one who has to handle it." He paused, gathering himself to continue. I listened, waiting for him to spill it all out. "Alicia requires a lot of foreplay. I mean, a lot. I have to spend 30 minutes just on foreplay. Then when she's ready, we can start having physical engagement. She likes to change positions frequently. On top of that, she wants me to talk dirty to her throughout. I love my wife, I really do, and when I have the energy, it's fantastic. I know guys who complain that their wives are frigid, unimaginative, or just want to get it over with. Alicia is none of those. But I don't have the stamina to do this every night, especially after dealing with all the crap I face during the day." He paused, glancing away. "Rich, sometimes I just feel better being alone. I hate to admit it. I mean, every man dreams of a woman like Alicia, a passionate woman who genuinely enjoys lovemaking. I know I'm lucky to have her, but..." I noticed his eyes starting to cloud over. "It's tough to reconcile the pain of marriage when you realize the part you played in your own troubles. I do so much for her, for the girls. I work my backside off to give them everything I didn't have as a kid. My dad was very thrifty. He only bought what I needed. I want more for my girls. And then there's my wife. And I enjoy spending time with them, they're my whole world. But sometimes, I just wish I didn't have to do something for someone else when I come home after dealing with all the crap at work. Sometimes I don't always want to be a dad or a husband or a boss. I think I missed a bit of that. How long has it been since you two were carnal? I mean, before the party?" He shook his head. I don't know, Rich. I really don't know. I didn't even realize so much time had passed. I nodded, a flicker of understanding dawning on me. Then I saw anger flash in his eyes. But that doesn't give her the right to do what she did, though, Richard. I didn't humiliate her in front of everyone. I didn't cheat on her. She should have come to me with our issues. Or why didn't she come to me? I had to take a risk with my next remark. It was crucial to convey my point to him without seeming like I was taking her side. Maybe for the same reason you never explained to her why you watch adult films. Communication can be tough, especially if you don't realize you need to say something in the first place. How do you communicate your unhappiness to your spouse? Simply put, you say, I'm unhappy. Touché. Things were escalating too much. Usually at moments like this I'd crack a joke, so I switched gears. So, Greg, about my wall. He caught on that I was teasing him, and grinned, shaking his head. Call it even for this one, idiot. I thought the punch in the face had evened things out. Not quite. I chuckled. Seeing Greg as he was before Halloween was refreshing, even if it was fleeting. Fair enough. That's when I noticed Nikki standing in the doorway with a peculiar expression. Her eyes urged me to see her right away. I left Greg to his meal and approached her. What's wrong, dear? She glanced around nervously and drew me closer to whisper. Oh, somehow, Alicia found out Greg's here. She's on her way. Damn. John probably called her to vent or something stupid, unknowingly gave away Greg's location. You need to intercept that woman at the door, Nikki. Nikki raised her hands and shook her head. Rich, I'm not getting involved in this mess. Greg needs to face this. He's been avoiding her for 2 weeks. I felt frustration rising toward my wife. She cheated on him. Haven't you forgotten that? No, I haven't. I've got a damn hole in the wall as a reminder. I glanced at Greg, who seemed oblivious to the impending showdown. What do you want me to do, Nikki? Her expression softened with resolve when she saw my determination to help my friend. He has to handle this himself, babe. You can be there for him as a friend, help him through it, but he can't run from it. She patted my chest and left. I turned to prepare Greg for what was coming. Greg, I heard your conversation. You can't exactly whisper. She's on her way. He rubbed his chin and winced, then his expression shifted to determination. Fine, he said, pushing away from the table. Turning to me, he met my gaze. I'm ready to face this, he declared. With that, he rose and walked out of my back door. Greg, a beautiful sunset, soft hues painted the pale sky, serene and almost calming. Greg, honey? The serenity shattered. I didn't respond to the alarmed voice signaling the arrival of my unfaithful wife. I didn't even turn to look at her. My eyes remained fixed on the sky above. Alicia interpreted my lack of reaction as an invitation, which, in some sense, she wasn't entirely wrong about. She settled beside me on Richard's back porch, drawing her knees to her chest, as if seeking protection. I've been searching everywhere for you, honey, she said, starting off in the worst possible way. I've been in the same place all night, I muttered, deliberately echoing the exact words I'd used when I found her cozying up to Dominic in Richard's kitchen a couple of weeks ago. She seemed a bit puzzled by my response. Greg, we need to talk, she said, and I nodded in agreement. From my side vision, I could sense her anguish. I avoided looking directly at her face, but it seemed like a grim sight, swollen eyes, flushed cheeks, a somber expression. At least that's how her voice conveyed it. I love you, honey. It's a lie, I cut her off. Greg, stop it. Alicia, just stop it. You can't claim to love me and then embarrass me the way you did, airing our issues in public like that. I would never do that to you. What are you talking about, Greg? You did this to me, she said, her voice rising with anger. You stormed down the stairs like a madman in front of everyone. You asked Susie if she knew I was sleeping with her husband, right in front of everyone's eyes. If you wanted to talk privately, you could have pulled me aside and yelled at me in the car. But no, you were the first one to air out my business like that. In a way, she had a point. I didn't see it that way at the time. I was blinded by rage. Okay, Alicia, I'll give you that, but I didn't initiate this. Your damn boyfriend confronted me, telling me all about your indiscretions in front of other people. I handled it the best I could. I was furious, rightfully so. Could I have handled it differently? I paused to rein in my emotions. But I didn't cheat with anyone. I didn't have someone come up to you and rub my betrayal in your face. I looked her squarely in the eyes. The anger drained from her expression, replaced by remorse and guilt. I know, Greg, she said softly. I simply shook my head. Do you really think so, Alicia? Do you really? Her eyes sparked again. Maybe you didn't physically betray me, Greg, but you weren't present for me. Remember last night when I wanted closeness in you? I shook my head. It was on my birthday. I treated myself to some beautiful lingerie from Victoria's Secret. It was so hot. I indulged in a fragrant bubble bath, getting excited, thinking about the night ahead. I lathered my body with eucalyptus-scented lotion, spent an hour doing my hair and makeup. Do you recall that night? I did remember that night. That was the day I had to fire Frank. He was my close friend, one of my assistant managers, back when I worked at Olive Garden. We'd become good friends over the years. When the allegations surfaced, I stood up for him vehemently. I was certain he wouldn't do something so reckless. But the girl had text messages, damn text messages. When they emerged, I was livid. I was the one who promoted him. I was the one who vouched for him. And I was the one who had to deal with it, or they'd deal with me. So needless to say, I wasn't in the best mood that evening. But I didn't forget her birthday. I made a reservation at her favorite restaurant, all set for a nice dinner. But all Alicia wanted that night was dessert. We went out to dinner for your birthday, and then we made love that night, Alicia. I recalled this. She shook her head sadly. We had lovemaking, Greg. You couldn't even enjoy it. Then when I tried to cuddle with you, you pushed me away, saying you were tired. That's why I gave you space. Her voice caught, and she swallowed hard. I knew she wasn't finished yet, so I waited for her to continue. Then I woke up in the middle of the night. I saw you at your computer. I saw you watching adult films and pleasuring yourself. The words came out forcefully, and then she broke down. Her body trembled as she tried to cry silently, but to no avail. I sat beside her, speechless. Slowly, I began to grasp her perspective. Hearing her side of things opened my eyes. Until tonight, she was just a deceitful cheater. Now I wasn't so sure who she really was. I get it, Alicia. All right, I took you for granted. But do you truly grasp this, Greg? Do you comprehend how deeply this devastated me? Can you fathom the pain of realizing that, at your best, you're not enough to satisfy your husband? I doubt you do. After that, I made a pact with myself to stop initiating lovemaking with you. I wanted you to desire me, but you never did. So, that's why you ended up with Dominic. Did he make you feel like a woman? She sniffled beside me and wiped her nose on her sleeve. Yes, Greg, he and Susie did. Damn it, Susie and I got drunk once in high school. Something happened that night. In the morning, we were mortified. We chalked it up to the drinks and pretended it never occurred. Well, over a decade later, I found myself at her doorstep in tears a few weeks afterward, feeling like the most inadequate woman alive. I went to her place. I was so low, so shattered. I told her I needed to get drunk, and did. The feeling of inadequacy started to fade, but it never truly went away. And how did you end up in bed with her and Glassjaw, Dominic? Came home from work and found us completely wasted. Susie confided in him about my issues. He began telling me how beautiful I was, how he desired me. Susie backed him up, mentioning our past in high school. He got excited and suggested we kiss. We were so drunk that we obliged. It all began with a playful kiss, but before I knew it, things had escalated beyond control. How many times did you sleep with them? She turned to gaze at the now darkened sky above us and whispered, Twice. It stung. The drunken episode was bad enough. I could eventually move past it. But knowing she'd been with them again was a whole other blow. So, at the party, in the kitchen, what were you and Dominic discussing? Her eyes flashed with anger and a hint of guilt as she recalled it. He was drunk, complimenting my hot costume, and suggesting we go to their place for some fun. I was worried someone might overhear, so I tried to hush him. I admitted my mistakes, saying the three of us couldn't continue. Then he got a bit forceful, pressing against me. That's when you walked over. Yes, I gathered my lingerie in a pile. Wasn't that what you said? She nibbled her lip, shaking her head. I was furious, Greg. Seeing Dominic pestering me like that just reminded me how little you valued me. Were you planning on heading to his place later for some fun since he appreciated you? She shook her head, locking eyes with me. No. I was hoping you'd finally take the initiative. I chose the Catwoman outfit because I knew you loved Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. You once told me how you fell for her because of that suit. I saw the way you looked at me in it. I saw desire in your eyes, mine. I almost skipped the party altogether to get what I'd been yearning for. I wish I had. I hoped when we got home you'd take me. And then Dominic happened. She spat his name out. Well, none of this would have happened if you hadn't slept with him. Why didn't you just talk to me, Alicia? She sadly shook her head again, sniffing. I don't know, Greg. I wish I did. Lord knows why I didn't. Well, I guess there's enough blame to go around. She turned to me, hopeful. So what now, Greg? I don't want to lose you. I love you so much. I'll do anything for us to get through this. My head swirled. Can we get through this? Can I forgive her, knowing I played a part in our downfall? Leave the past behind? I don't know, Alicia. So much has happened. It'll take a lot for us to start healing from this. A glimmer of hope sparked within her. She wiped her tears, gripping my hand. Please, honey, I'll do anything. Just give me a chance to show you how much I love you. I met her gaze, sensing hope. I began to feel it too. It'd take time, but maybe we could mend each other. If we both fought hard enough, there might be a chance. All right, Alicia. But it'll take several steps. First, we need counseling. It's necessary. Obviously, we have a lot to work through. We need to learn how to communicate with each other. She kissed my cheek, embracing my neck. Yes, darling. Whatever you say. Secondly, you need to cut ties with Susie. That's when I saw the light fade from her eyes, feeling it dim in my heart. What did you say? I said you need to end your friendship with Susie. Greg, why are you asking me to do this? I reclined in my chair, staring at her in disbelief. Seriously, Alicia? You cheated on me with her and her husband. What do you expect me to do? Just trust that it won't happen again? Every time you're with her, or talk to her, do you realize what goes through my mind? How can I heal if this wound keeps getting salt rubbed in it? She recoiled as if I'd struck her, tears welling up in her eyes. We locked eyes in silence, as seconds stretched into eternity. You want me to choose between my best friend and my husband? I can't do it, Greg. Please don't make me. Words couldn't convey the agony that coursed through me at that moment. Strangely, it was worse than catching her in the act. This time, there was no anger to mask it. My heart constricted painfully, crushed by the weight of the realization that it was too much to bear. The fact that she couldn't choose me over her best friend was devastating, a catastrophe of unfathomable proportions. The woman I loved most didn't love me the same way. I wasn't her one and only love. I shared her heart with another. Dominic's irrelevant now. I don't care about him. This is bigger, Alicia. But she couldn't sever her ties with Susie. The bond was too strong, rivaling her love for me. She couldn't let it go, even if it meant sacrificing our marriage. Sadly, we divorced less than a year later. Alicia fought tooth and nail to prevent it, even stooping to humiliating herself. I never imagined I'd see her pride crumble like that. She begged me at my workplace not to leave her, embarrassing herself in front of everyone. I begged too. It was a heart-wrenching plea that left everyone uncomfortable. Even I secretly hoped I'd give her another chance, but I couldn't bear the thought of her being around them. As long as she refused to relinquish her friendship, in essence, I was right. No spouse should have to share. A year later, the wounds still run deep. There are no winners here. We do our best for the kids, avoiding putting each other down in their presence. Yet many nights I've been a shoulder for Greg to cry on. But there was one silver lining. This Halloween, he brought a date to my party. She wasn't dressed as Catwoman. Maybe she's just a rebound, not his next great love. But finding someone new is still progress. Real life isn't about neatly packaged endings. It's a messy, gradual healing process. Alicia, Dominic, and Susie didn't show up at the party. They cut off contact with the rest of us. Susie remained staunchly by Alicia's side, accusing Greg of unfairness and trying to force an impossible choice. In my view, the choice wasn't impossible. Alicia simply didn't want to be married as much as a loving wife should. She claimed she'd do anything, but actions speak louder than words. She might have been willing to play the part of a love-making slave or a doting housewife, but when it came to sacrificing something personally significant, our marriage wasn't worth it to her. In the end, he's better off without her.
Discovered my girlfriend cheating in a video, confronted her at a restaurant, then vanished. We were watching some videos on her phone when a video appeared and she immediately swiped it away. I simply asked why she skipped it, and her reaction was shocking and not her usual self. She said something along the lines of, "I don't need to explain anything to you, so just F off." That level of aggressiveness was weird and extremely off-putting, so I told her that she got me concerned at that point and that her reaction was unnatural. Her next sentence shook me, and this is the point where I suspected something was seriously off. Either you drop it, or I show you the video, but I immediately break up with you afterward. This really put me in an ultimatum. She did nothing to convince me otherwise. I said I'd drop it, but the whole vibe was off. She obviously got upset by that and claimed that it was a video of her friend making out with some guy, which, lie or not, is really weird. For one, why would she have that on her phone? And second, she hasn't spoken to that friend in a year, and her phone is only a few months old. I tried forgetting about it, but it stuck with me, especially since she is a cheating apologist and her father is a chronic cheater. Now I feel like I'm going insane. She painted me as a control freak or insecure, and I'm not really sure what the reality of things is. I'm scared of talking to my friends about it because we have a lot of mutuals. Edit. Woke up to a bunch of comments, some rightfully directing at my stupidity. We plan to see each other this week, either tomorrow or the day after. I will bring up her reaction and the way she treated me and break it off. I won't ask to see the video. I don't think it will make a difference either way. Since a few of you asked, I will post an update soon. I feel you, OP. Relationships can be like walking through a minefield blindfolded, especially when you stumble upon a video that's apparently more classified than Area 51. Her reaction sounds like she's guarding state secrets, not a random video. And then her threatening to break up with you over a video? That's like playing a game of relationship Russian roulette. Also not the greatest options. Honestly, beat her to the punch. Break up with her. Update. Hey guys, this is an update of this post, so for context, please check that out. I took your advice and confronted her a day ago. It went something like this. We met up yesterday for dinner. She was unusually cheerful and positive, seemingly excited for the date. I honestly believe she put up that front because she knew I was going to bring this up and wanted me to seem like the bad guy and guilty for ruining her. Mood. We sat down. I was obviously nervous and a bit more reserved. She was very talkative, basically not allowing me to say anything. She would follow a question with another question, basically trying to postpone me bringing it up or hoping that I would eventually forget about it. I interrupted her and said I needed to talk about something more serious. Then I followed up with the fact that the way she acted towards me and the whole situation was unfair and borderline abusive. Her pretty much fake smile was immediately gone, and she instantly got annoyed. She said something along the lines of, "You know, if you're going to be bringing this up the whole night, I don't want to have dinner with you." Basically positioning to walk away. Now, to note, this type of childlike behavior has happened in the past, and my dumb butt without fail would always convince her to stay, change the topic, or chase her down the street as she would be walking off. I would always acquiesce and we would go by her way again. Very childlike. This time was different though. I just said, "Okay," and she said, "Fine then," and started walking away. Usually it takes a minute or so for me to start chasing her down, but I just apologized to the waiter for his troubles and went home. At this point, I was half in tears because, again, I would always try to remedy the situation, and it isn't in my nature to just drop something like this. I ranted to myself for a few minutes and decided to cool off with the show. After an hour or so, she called. I picked up, and she was crying, saying stuff like, "Why do you always have to ruin everything?" That's when I snapped. Ruin everything? What about how you treat me like a doormat? How about the fact that I have to walk on eggshells when I talk with you? How about you hiding the video from me and giving me BS afterward? At this point, she said that she knew I was still stuck on that video. But I said that it's not about the video anymore, it's just how I've been treated. At this point, I started talking about how I was treated, and in my opinion, in an effort to divert the conversation, she said, "Fine, it's not a video of my friend making out." I snapped back, saying that I didn't give a crap about the video anymore and that I was out, that this was over. She tried to get me to listen, and we were kind of talking over each other, but she managed to say what the video was about. In her words, it was a video of her making out with a guy, but that it was just around the same time as we started dating, and since we weren't official yet, she thought it was fine to see her options. All I said was, "Yeah, and I love how you kept that video around for safekeeping months into us dating." She said she already deleted it and that she was sorry. I was kind of over it though, and said that it wasn't about the video anymore and that I was done. All she said at the end was, "Okay, if you say so. That's it." She is now blocked on everything. Honestly, I am inclined to believe this story more than the other one. But I'm also inclined to not give an F. I'm still shook up about it, and adrenaline is pumping just by typing this, but I'm glad this nightmare is over. Sounds like she's the type to blame bad weather on Op for forgetting to wear their lucky socks. Talk about a scapegoat. At least now you know you won't be the one ruining everything by finding someone who doesn't keep relationship souvenirs on their phone. She couldn't talk her way out of this one. Way to stand your ground this time, OP. What would you have done? Next up, OP's marriage hits a rockier patch than the mosh pit at a 90-band reunion. Found my wife cheating on me last night. Hi, I tried posting this on another related subreddit and it was removed. I read the rules here and I'm very sure it doesn't violate any for this sub. Please, mods, if you want to remove this, let me know why. I'm trying to find support for the turmoil I'm feeling, and I don't know who else to turn to but anonymous people on the internet. Anyway, here it goes. I met my wife in 2011. I was DJing a social event at school and playing some 90s rock. I was playing Third Eye Blind, and my wife liked the song that came on. She talked to me, we bonded over our mutual love of the band. Yada yada, we started dating. Fast forward to 2013, we got engaged and took a trip to celebrate. We had this memory we talk about a lot of listening to the whole Third Eye Blind catalog and singing along to all the songs. Together. We got married that year. Fast forward through our whole marriage, we had this thing where we would try to see the band as much as we could. We saw them whenever they were on tour, a total of 9 times during our 9 years of marriage. Last night, we were supposed to see them for the 10th time. If you do the math in your head, we've been married for 10 years as well. That's coming up in November. So, I had this whole thing planned, where we would go see the show, stay over at a hotel, have a romantic night. I get home from work on Friday. My wife is getting ready. She looks amazing. I see a text come on her phone. You know how the rest of the story goes. I don't even want to type it. She met some guy the night before when I was away for work. The part that killed me the most was she wrote that he needed to get condoms and he LOL'd. So I'm left wondering, did they even use any? What does it matter anymore anyway? After reading that, I just left the house and started for the concert. She calls me about 15 minutes later like, "Where are you?" "Oh, just on the way to the show." "What? Why?" "You know why. Think long and hard as to why I might be acting this way." I just hang up. Anyway, I think I was in shock still. I was pretty cool about it, but there's some backstory there that I don't want to get into as to why I was prepared. She's cheated twice before in the past. I didn't really have any emotions at the time. Actually, when I started typing this, it was the first time I felt anything. So she calls back and starts going through the motions. "Oh, we are just friends. Oh, we didn't actually do it. Oh, I was drunk. Oh, it was just in a little bit." Then it was all, "Come back and let's talk about this like adults," as if I'm the childish one for having stormed out. I'm thinking, no, if that happens, I'm not seeing the show. We're just going to talk about how she cheated, and she's going to try and seduce me, and that thought grossed me out. I never thought about sex with my wife and felt gross, but then I did. So I got to the concert and the guy scanned my ticket. He looks at me and says, "There's 2, indicating that he wanted to scan the other one. I just stared at him blankly and said, "Yes, there's 2, and went inside. It was so weird. I felt like I was hypnotized. And then there was the show, amazing show. I had a good time. I met some nice people in my row, and we had a fun time enjoying the concert together. Some lyrics hit a little differently. I've never been so alone, and I've never felt more alive. I felt pretty alive at the concert. I danced with the crowd and screamed my frustrations into the loudspeakers. No one could hear me over the loud rock music. It was over pretty early. I wanted to sit at the bar and drink, but that would have required talking to someone, and I just couldn't. Outside the context of the concert, I was thinking about the texts again, so I went to the hotel I had booked for my wife and me and went to sleep alone. I woke up to about 30 emails. She was up all night feeling all kinds of emotions, I guess. Guilt, shame, anger at me. Those were the most surreal, the ones where she was mad at me for going through her phone. A lot of bargaining and pleading. The worst was she had sent me cards I had written for her years before, anniversary cards, birthday cards, Christmas cards. I always handwrote a letter for her, professing my love for her. I never used to write anyone cards like these, but I did for her. She used to write cards like these for me. She hasn't in a number of years. I think her intent was that upon reading the cards, my heart would soften, and I would realize how much I loved her. I would come to my senses and come to her, and we would talk it through, and I would forgive her, and it would all be better. But instead, it just made me realize how much she doesn't love me. At this point, I can't forgive her. I forgave her once, and here we are. If I forgive her again, it's just a matter of when, not if. I'm back in this same scenario writing sad stories on Reddit. The only question now is whether I respect myself enough to make sure this never happens to me again. The community has some thoughts. Let's check them out. First up, give her divorce papers and a card. The op replies, "OMG, that's perfect." Someone else chimes in, "You already gave her enough chances. It's time for you to move on. Who knows how many more instances have occurred that you don't know of? Get tested for STDs. Talk to a lawyer. Get DNA tested. For kids, if any, talk to your friends and family. Don't leave the house. Instead, make her leave, unless it's under her name." The OP replies, "This is the worst part. It's in both our names, and there's no way for me to make her leave. So it's either stay with her in our house where she will make my life miserable, Or I move out and get some peace but leave behind all my stuff. My bed, which I never want again anyway, my pets, my garden I've been growing all summer. It's one thing that she cheated, but it's an entirely new injury that now my life is completely uprooted. I'm living an hour from work now with my parents because I'm a teacher and I don't get any income over the summer. I'm not getting paid again until the end of August, and the bank account is running dry. I'll be spending my last cents on rent for her to live in our apartment, probably with the dude I caught her with, while I'm living with my parents. And I can't not pay the rent because, of course, I'm on the hook for that legally. Oh, and the AC has broken at my parents' place and won't be fixed for 3 weeks. It was 95% humidity earlier today, but it's cooled down to 87 after the rain, so I've got that going for me. At least you got to enjoy Third Eye Blind and some unexpected lyrical therapy at the concert. As for those anniversary cards, those are now collector's items in the Hall of Irony. And dealing with broken AC during a heat wave at your parents' place? That's some straight-up Murphy's Law right there. Hang in there, buddy. It's clear you're navigating through a storm, but hey, storms eventually pass. Focus on what brings you peace and clarity, whether it's your garden despite leaving it behind, or finding solace in the support of friends and family. And remember, you've got the strength to rewrite your story, AC or no AC. And hey, I heard going 30 minutes in a sauna a day reverses the signs of aging. Maybe this no AC thing can reverse the stress she's just put on your body. Thoughts? Thank you for joining us today.
I observed John walking into the bar and greeted him with a grin. Despite the early hour and the almost empty bar, I hoped John would join me. It had been a while since we hung out, as John was busy with something in his life and couldn't make time. Worried, I tried calling and emailing, but I couldn't reach John. I even attempted to visit John's home and office, but he was never there. I hoped his issues were resolved, but the anger on his face indicated otherwise. I stood up to shake hands but was suddenly knocked to the ground by a strong punch from John to the jaw. My head hit a nearby table as I fell. I muttered a shocked exclamation and spat out a bloody tooth. John stood over me, ready to hit again. He accused me, saying I knew and that my wife and I were laughing at him, bet that we enjoyed how trusting he was. My swollen jaw and the likely concussion made it hard for me to concentrate. I couldn't make sense of John's words. The only word I could say was, "What?" He continued to strike my ribs and legs. John shouted about my wife and me helping Amanda cheat. Bar patrons intervened, grabbing John and pulling him back. I, stunned and puzzled, looked on. The bartender called the police, and luckily, a patrol car was nearby. The ambulance took longer to arrive. While John was detained, I, helped by strangers, was assessed and placed on a gurney for transport to the emergency room. I lost consciousness before the ambulance even left, drowned out by the siren. To me, it felt like a short, bad dream. When I woke up, I realized I was in a hospital. It wasn't a nightmare. It was real. As I regained consciousness, Emily, my wife, entered with tears. She expressed her apologies and explained that she had left briefly to call my parents. I sat up a little and tried to gather my thoughts when Emily sat down and took my hand. Sleep and medication reduced the swelling, making my words more understandable. I recounted how I didn't know what happened, how I'd never seen him like this before. He said something about Amanda cheating and us causing it. His words made no sense. Emily's tears continued to fall as I spoke. Maybe I heard wrong, but he seemed to think we were making these trips so Amanda could cheat on him. This is crazy. Why would he think of something so crazy? I fell silent, looking at Emily. Lowering her head, she whispered an apology. I didn't understand why she was apologizing. He hit me, thinking we were helping her cheat. It sounded stupid. Why would he think we'd do something so bad? What kind of terrible people could do this to someone they care about? I looked at Emily as she raised her head. Something was off in her behavior. Maybe I was out of my mind, but her actions were suspicious since she was usually vocal about her opinions, especially about relationships with close friends. She might have been shocked because it wasn't what she expected. As I was about to ask her what was going on, the doctor came in and said my jaw was bruised, not broken. If I didn't have a headache, I could leave with Emily tonight. My head hurt, but something was clearly wrong with Emily, so I lied to the doctor that I felt fine to leave. Time passed. Nurses worked diligently with documents, denying me the chance to ask Emily. They were silent on the drive home. As Emily drove, we didn't even turn on music. We were silent the whole way. I needed answers, but by the time I got home, I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. After changing clothes, I fell asleep. Emily curled up next to me, hugging tightly. After my shower, I joined Emily in the kitchen. Still in pain, but with a clearer head, I saw Emily deep in thought. Finally realizing I was there, she asked, "How are you feeling now?" "Okay, but I have a small Hitachi, and everything hurts. I just need a day of rest, and I'll be fine. I still can't figure out why John went so crazy." I took a sip, and continued, "Did Amanda say anything to you? Have you talked to her since yesterday to find out what happened to him? I chatted with her a bit yesterday, and she was as shocked as I was about what he did to you." I looked at my wife while she spoke. Her response seemed measured, but there was something more. She appeared sad, which was unusual given her typically upbeat personality. She seemed reserved. I thought maybe the attack had shaken her more than I initially thought. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. "It's okay, honey. I'm fine. I've come to my senses." Soon, my shirt was wet from her tears. We hugged with the words, "I love you." Holding each other tightly, we both called into work and spent the entire day at home. Something besides physical pain bothered me. None of it made any sense. John's sudden attack, accusing us of helping Amanda cheat. Emily's sudden change to being timid. Her vague answers to basic questions. I wanted to press her about her conversation with Amanda, but Emily was on the verge of tears. I thought now was not the best time for a confrontation. Despite both staying home, we seemed distant. I sat in the backyard, watching the wind move the trees and grass, thinking I needed to understand why John attacked me. We had been friends for a long time, and I had never seen John lose his temper without a good reason. I thought about my wife's words and couldn't recall her ever saying that John's wife hadn't cheated and had only apologized for the attack on me. We needed to hear John's side of the story, and the best way was from John himself. Although there was a risk he might attack again, it seemed like the most direct way to understand what happened. I would then talk with Emily about our roles and what made John think we were betraying him. Emily informed me that she planned to briefly stop by work to pick up her laptop, as she would be home for the week and didn't want to fall behind. After she left, I decided to visit John. On the way, I tried to call him but couldn't reach him. I hoped John was out of prison, so I took a taxi to his house. If we were lucky, we could figure out what caused the mess and get back to normal. Upon reaching John's entrance, my stomach dropped when I saw Emily's car. Instead of ringing the doorbell, I walked to the back until I heard Emily talking to Amanda. Emily was no longer silent. She was furious. John had overheard her talking about setting up a date and having my back, a conversation not meant for him. This explained why he attacked me. According to Emily, John heard her say that she'd cover for her, and Tom and John would be busy, so she could go out without arousing John's suspicions. It seemed John took it to mean that I knew what was going on. Emily claimed she would have warned me if she knew. It wasn't until I was attacked that she realized John knew. He used his phone call to express his hatred towards her, choosing to rot in prison rather than live with her. Emily wanted to sympathize, but it was Amanda who left John. Emily's support for Amanda caused serious problems in her marriage, and things could worsen when I found out. She knew it was wrong, but hoped for a short fling. Instead, Emily's support led to the worst. Now she must deal with the consequences because of Amanda, who couldn't keep her actions in check. I expressed my concerns to Emily about my marriage being in serious trouble once I found out. She tried to reassure me, stating that I never cheated, and if needed, she would tell me that. I couldn't see her, but I could tell from her voice that she closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead as she spoke. Despite Emily's attempt to reassure me, I argued that I had lied to her, helped her scam my best friend, and as a result, he attacked me. I doubted that I could make her believe anything I told her, especially given her role in the situation. Emily insisted that I didn't do anything wrong and that I should know this. Frustrated, I told her that it didn't matter, and I had no idea how to fix the situation. If I didn't have a solution by the time I found out, my marriage would probably end just like hers did. I couldn't believe what a fool I was for helping her. I warned her that if I lost it, I would never talk to her again. Emily, trying to console me, mentioned that I had always been a loving wife, and Tom knew how much I loved him. I sarcastically replied that I was such a loving wife that my support of my promiscuous friend resulted in my husband getting his butt kicked by his best friend. She insisted that I didn't understand the situation and that it would be years, at best, before I regained trust. I couldn't help but feel like a fool, wondering if Tom would ever trust me again. Having heard enough, I calmly returned to the street. My resilient nature allowed me to remain calm and focus on the task at hand. While waiting for a taxi, I realized I needed to start setting things right. But first, I needed to make sure I had all the facts. It was time to visit a friend. The passed-away sergeant and detectives appeared confused when I expressed my intention to pay bail, but after years of dealing with strange incidents in police work, they simply shrugged. They smirked at John's look when he saw me pull him out and laughed openly when I told John to just shut up until he was told to talk. Confused, John followed me and silently got into the car. After I gave the driver the address, we sat in silence until we arrived at the crime scene. The same bartender was on duty, nervous and obviously afraid of trouble. I quickly calmed him down, asking for a bottle of Glenmorangi's Signet, 2 glasses, and to be left alone. As we moved to a corner booth, I poured a generous portion into both glasses and pushed it towards John. We both drank and exchanged a sarcastic toast to the first drink. I looked at my friend. I explained to John that I didn't know about this setup. I just wanted to hang out and have a good time with him. They used our friendship against him, knowing I would never agree to this, so they started their lousy scheme without my knowledge. John looked at me carefully, able to tell when I was talking nonsense. It was clear from the expression on his face that now I was being honest. Once the initial anger had passed and he had cooled down in prison, John was able to think reasonably about what I told him. He expressed how she tore his heart out, and my wife Emily helped her. I shared my frustration, stating that I gave our marriage everything I had, only for it to be a waste of time because she chose to follow some strange man into bed. I refilled the drinks and simply listened to my friend while John expressed his frustration and anger about his marriage. When the whiskey and verbalization of the event eventually calmed John down, he apologized for the attack. John admitted he probably should have talked to me first, but he couldn't help himself. The revelation that his marriage and our friendship were over made him feel out of control. As much as it hurt that she cheated on him, the thought of me stabbing him in the back was even worse. Cheating was bad enough, but the idea of me laughing at him hurt even more. He sincerely apologized. I grinned, sipping my whiskey. "It's okay. I probably deserved it for having an affair with your sister sometime during the Christmas holidays." When I asked how he found out she was cheating, John shook his head. He explained that a few weeks ago, he felt something was wrong in his marriage, so he started to pull away. He eventually concluded that she must be cheating, preparing to hire a private investigator. While he was at work, his phone started showing video and audio from the Ring camera on the front porch. The motion sensor went off while Amanda was picking up an Amazon package. During a phone call, she made an appointment to have closeness with someone and mentioned that I and Emily could help her, just like before. It didn't sound like I didn't know what was going on. It sounded like I was actively participating in the deception. I stared at him, not believing his eyes. 2 marriages had ended because John's wife couldn't close her legs and forgot about the camera, so Emily cheated too. Tom hadn't thought about it, but it made sense that she would do the same thing. She covered for John's wife. Actually, he was almost convinced that Emily didn't cheat. He heard them talking before they picked John up, and that convinced him that she wasn't out for a walk. Considering Emily's fidelity, Tom questioned why John wanted a divorce. Maybe it would be easier to forgive her if she had slept with someone else. The situation was even worse for him. The problem was not betrayal, but trust. Not only had she repeatedly lied to him about her actions and John's wife, but she had used their friendship to cover it up in the most evil way possible and make him an active participant in the deception. He wondered how he could stay married to her if he couldn't trust her anymore and his best friend hated her. He believed that trust could be restored, clarifying that he didn't trust his wife at all. However, he acknowledged that Emily loved him, prompting John to ask if he was sure this was the end. I expressed my belief that trust, cemented by time, was not stronger but weaker. While people may forgive, they never forget. He had no intention of spending the rest of his life hoping that, in years to come, this would be just a faded memory. I asserted that Emily knew what she was doing, and there was nothing she could say to solve the problem. It was time for him to leave and start over. John envied his friend for having an amicable divorce, and they would both remain on good terms. John joked about trying to find a Mexican brothel to get Amanda the right job for her skill set and pay less child support. I laughed, expressing awe at John's ability to see life as it is. It felt like his world was ending, but he knew that in the long run, he would be okay. He went home and talked to Emily, and since she already knew what was going to happen, it would likely be relatively smooth sailing. She cried and begged for counseling, but she understood that he would not be able to come to terms with her behavior. I recognized that it was out of character for her, and she knew it. It was time for him to take a new direction and look at his life with fresh eyes. The chapter in his marriage to Emily was over. Second story. This literally occurred this morning. I'm sharing it here in the hope of venting and gaining some perspective because I've been extremely upset all day and unable to process this rationally. My wife is currently 8 months pregnant with our child, and we live next to another married couple in their late 30s. I've never been a fan of the guy next door. I've always found him to be invasive, and his overly friendly demeanor often seems like he's prying and overly clingy. I'm not sure if my feelings about him are influencing my judgment in this situation, or if this incident simply confirms my suspicions. I left for work as usual, but then decided on the way there that I wasn't in the right mindset, so I called off work. I made a pit stop for breakfast and then headed home to surprise my wife. It took me about 40 minutes in total. When I arrived home, I entered through the back door and was greeted by an unexpected sight. My wife and our neighbor sitting on our living room couch. She was facing him, fully clothed, but with her shirt pulled up to expose her very pregnant stomach. He was facing her, using both hands to rub lotion on her stomach. They both froze in the moment, and my wife asked why I was back so soon. She explained that our neighbor had stopped by to borrow a toolbox while she was applying lotion to her skin, and had asked if he could feel the baby, to which she had agreed. I immediately told him to leave before I physically removed him, and he promptly exited. I tried to maintain my composure and talk to my wife to get the whole story. She claimed that our neighbor's wife is infertile, news to me considering he's never stopped complaining about his personal problems, and he simply wanted to feel the baby. That's her version of events, and she's sticking to it. However, I'm not satisfied with this explanation. In my view, there's a significant difference between allowing someone to feel the baby for a brief moment and inviting them into our home to rub lotion on her stomach. If it had been a close friend of ours, I might have understood, but I've never liked this guy, and my wife has never shown any particular closeness to him beyond polite greetings. She's not the type to let just anyone touch her. It's also rather convenient that he showed up so early, right after I left for work, shortly after his own wife had also gone to work. Furthermore, he's never asked to borrow anything from me before, so it strikes me as odd that he urgently needed a toolbox around 9:30 in the morning. I have doubts about my wife's story. This is the first time my trust in her has wavered. Her explanation just doesn't add up. When I mentioned that I might inform his wife about the incident, she strongly discouraged me, suggesting I shouldn't blow it out of proportion. If it was innocent, why should it be blown out of proportion? Even if there's nothing more to it, I'm not comfortable with what I witnessed. I'm not okay with him touching my unborn child in our home without me present. I understand it's her body and her choice, but I'm not okay with this situation. Feeling the baby kick would be one thing, but he was casually sitting on our sofa, applying lotion to her stomach while they engaged in a private conversation. I'm struggling to find a way to convey my disbelief without causing stress that could be harmful to her or our baby. I don't want to start a fight during this stage of her pregnancy, but my mind is racing and I'm unsettled by what transpired. Any advice would be welcome. Update. I'm providing this single update in response to the overwhelming support and numerous requests to do so. I didn't anticipate such a response, and I've seen references to my situation on other subreddits, so I feel compelled to address it. Many of you were correct. Congratulations. After reading through all your responses, talking to friends, and reflecting for a day, my wife maintained her story, apologized for making me uncomfortable, and assured me it wouldn't happen again. Bob, our neighbor, also left a handwritten note in the mailbox, specifically apologizing. However, I still didn't feel at ease, and the consensus was that I should talk to my neighbor's wife, whom we'll call Sally. So, that's exactly what I did. I waited for my neighbor to leave for work, then called my mother-in-law to take my wife out for lunch and a girls' outing, giving her a chance to get away from the house. I left for work as usual, but then called off again and stayed with a friend. Around noon, I received a text from my wife, informing me that she was with her mother-in-law and would be back by dinner time. When I returned home, I went to Sally's door and knocked. Bob decided to inform Sally that I had kicked him out and made a scene, stating that I didn't want either of them to speak to us anymore because I was angry about his assistance to my wife. To my surprise, I discovered that both Sally and Bob had been visiting my house while I was occupied elsewhere for the past few weeks. My wife had approached Sally and Bob, asking if they could help with chores she couldn't manage alone due to her pregnancy. Sometimes Sally assisted with small tasks, or simply spent time there, sometimes both, and at times just Bob. My wife told Sally that I was aware of it and was fine with their help, which is why she was baffled by her husband's false claims of my anger. Sally showed me the text she sent to my wife. She had her number, not mine, seeking clarification about whether she was still welcome over, but my wife hadn't responded. Since I don't interact with Sally and Bob frequently, she assumed her husband was telling the truth. Sally also confessed that she noticed my wife and Bob becoming close friends, attributing it to the pregnancy, and dismissed it as his way of coping with their infertility. I described what I had witnessed to her, including the tool incident, which turned out to be untrue. We both reached the same conclusions. We both shed tears, shared a hug for the first time, and alternated between denying and accepting the situation while trying to calm each other down. We took a walk around the block together and devised a plan. She intended to call Bob at work and inform him that my wife had messaged her, confessing to an affair between the two of them to see how he reacted. I returned to my friend's place and began experiencing severe panic attacks, fearing I had made a terrible mistake, ruined my marriage, and worried that I might be wrong. A little later, I received a call from my wife, yelling at me to find a way to leave work and come home, so I hurried home. Bob had called her and told her what Sally had informed him. She accused me of being crazy and a terrible person, even considering leaving me. I was in the midst of a panic attack, thinking I had destroyed my life over nothing, while also trying to calm her down for the sake of our baby. On impulse, I told her that if she was leaving, I would still request a DNA test. That's when everything changed. Her entire demeanor shifted to pleading, begging, apologizing, hyperventilating, and holding me. She asked me how I had found out while denying that anything had happened. I reassured her and asked if she would talk to me if we went for a drive. She agreed. I drove us to a parking lot, and we talked. I told her that if there was any chance of anything happening, she needed to tell me what had transpired because I already knew quite a bit. She confessed that Bob had made advances a few times before she became pregnant. There was uncertainty about the paternity of our baby. Bob had occasionally visited and acted as a dad on rare occasions, just in case it's his. They hadn't been intimate for months. She suggested we could move away, emphasized that the baby was ours no matter what, and claimed that Bob had manipulated her. She admitted lying to Sally to justify Bob's visits for daddy duties. I asked her if she would stay with her mother-in-law for a few days while I calmed down, and she agreed. I took her home, helped her pack, and dropped her off. I've packed up my essential belongings and am staying in a friend's basement. My friend spoke to my wife on my behalf, telling her that if the baby is mine, I'll take responsibility, but if it isn't, it's her concern. In any case, I'll be filing for divorce. My friends took my phone and removed my presence from social media. She has been attempting to reach out to my friends, but they have told her to stay away. I talked to my boss, who has been understanding. The last update I received from Sally was that Bob hadn't returned home and wasn't responding to her calls and texts. I feel like I've lost everything. In less than a week, my life has completely fallen apart. The only thing keeping me going is the slim chance that the baby is mine. I have nothing else. I woke up today feeling disappointed that I woke up at all. I've never felt so isolated, and I haven't come to terms with any of it yet. I'm praying for the first time in my life, hoping to stop feeling this way and find the strength to move forward. Final update. I'm not sure if anyone will recall my initial posts, as they were removed, and I haven't received an explanation despite messaging the mod team. I'm uncertain if this update will be deleted as well. If anyone wishes, they can use removed it to access the posts if they aren't visible on my profile. I continue to receive messages regularly requesting an update, so this will be my final one. In a condensed version of my very lengthy story, a week after my previous update, my soon-to-be ex-wife gave birth to our child, and I was present at the hospital. I am indeed the father. The weeks following my last update were extremely challenging, with drama added by both sides of our families and friends. Fortunately, I've received immense support from the majority of people in my life, as well as from all of you. My wife and I decided to sit down and discuss matters after her discharge, in my friend's basement with my friend nearby in case I needed support. She came over, and we expressed everything we needed to say. I vented and said many hurtful things, some of which I regret. She spent the entire time apologizing and pleading for me to take her back, hoping to give our family a chance to endure everything that transpired. This continued for about an hour, until I realized there was nothing more to be said, and I no longer felt any romantic love for her. She acknowledged that our marriage was over, and we agreed to prioritize our daughter above all else. We planned to work out a custody arrangement amicably and eventually become more active co-parents once our wounds heal. She has the potential to be a great mother, but she failed as a wife. My sole focus now is to get myself in the right mental state to be the best father possible. We also intend to sell our home eventually, but for now, I'm staying in an apartment. Sally is ending her relationship with Bob. He's currently residing with his mother and continues to avoid direct communication with Sally. She mentioned that the last message she received from him conveyed his understanding of his actions, an apology for hurting her, an expression of love, and a willingness to accept a divorce without contesting it. Sally is finding it challenging to cope with everything and lacks a support system. As a result, we are forming a friendship, primarily two individuals who have been hurt leaning on each other for support. She also intends to begin therapy. Just to clarify, I have no intentions of having anything beyond a platonic friendship with Sally. She's a wonderful person, but that's the extent of it. I still haven't fully come to terms with my new role as a parent. Mentally, I had already prepared myself for the possibility that the child might not be mine. I plan to attend parenting classes and spend more time bonding with my daughter during her early years. It's a daunting prospect, but I am genuinely happy. I understand there's a lot of work ahead and more emotional healing to do, but I am in a stable place and I am a father. That's what matters most. Third story. My wife and I have been married for 6 years. We met soon after our previous marriages ended and quickly fell in love. It's been fantastic. We have our disagreements like any couple, but we've had a wonderful life together, and for the first time, I felt genuinely loved. Then, 3 weeks ago, I discovered she cheated on me. Some context. I've been dealing with anxiety and depression. In the last 6 months, I noticed something wasn't right, and at my wife's urging, I sought help from a new doctor to explore different medications. Her daughter also deals with anxiety and depression, so my wife manages a lot. I understand it's tough, but she mentioned that it had become increasingly challenging for her to cope with my depression in recent months. I didn't feel like going out or doing much, and I probably wasn't the most enjoyable person to be around. I admit I didn't put in as much effort as I should have to improve my mental health until it seemed too late. My wife has a group of friends she attends rock concerts with, which isn't my scene, so I'm fine with her going without me. It's her time with friends, and I get some time to myself. I prefer being at home. But one of the guys in her group is the person she cheated on me with. She claimed they had been good friends for 3 years, and only in the month before she cheated did she start flirting with him. She chose to spend a weekend alone by the lake to clear her head, claiming it was tough living in a home with constantly negative vibes. That weekend away was when she cheated. I should have seen it coming. She dislikes being alone, so her idea of a solitary weekend should have been a warning sign. When I found out, my mind was made up. We need a divorce. Collect your things and leave. I want no part of you. For the first couple of days, I was hurt, angry, and resolute about starting afresh. My wife pleaded for me to come back. She said marriages can withstand this. She doesn't understand why she did it, and she wants to reconcile. I wasn't convinced. But as the initial shock faded, I reflected on how these 6 years have been the best. This was unlike her. She was the last person I'd imagined would cheat on me. Until recently, she was an incredibly loving and caring wife. So I reached out, about 5 days after discovering the truth. She came over, and I expressed my wish to work things out. I wanted her to return home to see if we could salvage our relationship. But she said she didn't want to. She explains there's something clearly wrong for her to act this way, something wrong with the marriage and something off in her mind. She mentioned lining up an apartment and planning to move out, uncertain if we can salvage things. So, I ask her if it's because she's still in touch with the friend she had an affair with. She clarified she's not leaving me for him, but she does have feelings for him, making it impossible for her to focus on us as long as those emotions linger. That's where I stand, heartbroken, feeling hit twice. I learned from a mutual friend yesterday that the friend she's been talking to has stopped flirting, reduced communication, and she's disappointed. It seems like a midlife crisis, seeking attention and serotonin while we're apart. I'm approaching 7 weeks since the D-Day, and the pain persists. With the guidance of a friend, I realized I'm codependent on my wife. My happiness relied entirely on her. She was my whole world. When she left, I felt like I had lost everything. Every day, I'm striving to make myself stronger. Acknowledging my codependency issues, I'm actively working on becoming more self-reliant. Currently, I wouldn't be good for anyone, as I'd likely cling to a new partner, setting myself up for more pain. For those aiming to reconcile, it's essential to introspect deeply first. Understand why you truly desire reconciliation. Great memories and a happy marriage are valid reasons to attempt overcoming betrayal, but ensure it's not solely because your spouse was your entire emotional support. We all need to stand independently emotionally. That's my lesson. I'm unsure how my story will conclude. I'm not even entirely certain I still want to reconcile. I've initiated no contact with my wife to focus on what's most important. Me. Update. Approaching 11 weeks post. D-Day. I'm about to sit down with my wife and compel her to decide. I don't desire divorce, but she's left me with no alternative. I can't continue living like this. From the start, I sensed she wanted to explore dating and freedom while keeping me as a backup plan. After a conversation where she shared details about her dating life, it became apparent. She deliberately hurt me, making it clear she was pushing me away. The following morning, I realized it's over. I can't have our marriage hanging in uncertainty while she seeks a replacement. To me, this isn't about working things out. She mentioned missing what we had while dating, but I strongly disagree. I can't tolerate this any longer. I wish to end it outright, but my therapist suggests confronting her with a choice. I'll ask her to halt communication with other men and try to mend our marriage, or she's choosing divorce. This approach prevents her from playing the victim, as she has a say in this. I don't want a divorce, but I refuse to live in this manner. She's shown no interest in reconciling over the past few weeks. Instead, she's sought my help for things she could have asked the guy she's dating. I'm furious and deeply hurt. I'd say there's less than a 1% chance she wants to reconcile. I expect a struggle where she avoids mentioning divorce to sidestep being seen as the villain. She'll likely argue that I haven't given her enough time and that I'm pushing too hard for us to reconcile. Nearly 3 months is ample time to decide whether to stay in a marriage. This turmoil began after my wife spent a weekend with another guy. Despite my willingness to reconcile, she chose to live independently. Despite enduring 2 major blows, I hoped for a positive resolution. Not all stories have a happy ending, it seems. I hope the excitement of dating again is worth sacrificing our marriage. Update. After 11 weeks of coping with my WS's indecision, I finally gave her an ultimatum between the guys she was dating during her newfound freedom or our marriage. She chose the guys. Days later, she claims to have second thoughts. After a week of on and off discussions about reconciliation, I grew tired of the back and forth, and once again, asked her to choose between me and the dating life. For the second time in 11 days, she opted for her freedom. I'm fully aware I was foolish to believe she'd genuinely want to fix things. I let my codependency influence me for 3 months, but it's truly over now. I'm restarting the divorce process and removing her from my life. The hardest part for me right now is grappling with the harsh reality of a failed marriage and being rejected by the woman I love, twice. How did you manage to get past the thought of your WS with someone else? She considers this guy her boyfriend, and he'll be at her family Thanksgiving. It's the same family that used to spend Christmas Eve at our home. Now they'll be with him. I'm absolutely certain I'm making the right choice. There's no doubt. But the pain of being betrayed and her essentially choosing this guy over me, it's excruciating. I don't know how to get through this. Yesterday marked the final hearing for our divorce, precisely 5 months from when I discovered her infidelity. As we left the lawyer's office, she hugged me and wished me happiness. I echo that sentiment. We parted ways for the last time, both with tears in our eyes. She was the one person I was certain I'd spend my life with. That didn't happen. So, while this is a new beginning, an opportunity to find someone who will treat me and my daughter as we deserve, it's a somber time. The pain of her actions won't fade quickly. Rebuilding trust will be the most challenging. She took more from me than she realizes. Cheating is the cruelest way to convey not loving someone anymore.
Before meeting Cindy, my life was fairly uncomplicated. Coming from a modest, hardworking family, I grew up understanding the value of self-reliance. My parents always stressed solving problems on your own rather than leaning on others, and that philosophy stuck with me as I pursued an engineering degree at Florida State University. It was a tough but rewarding experience, and I was determined to make my family proud by being the first to graduate. In my first year of college, I focused heavily on my studies and worked part-time to help pay for tuition. My social life took a back seat, but that didn't bother me. I always believed personal sacrifice was part of achieving success. Then, in my second semester, everything shifted when I met Cindy Albee. Little did I know this chance encounter would change the course of my life. Cindy and I met during a political science class project. From the moment I saw her, I couldn't imagine someone like her noticing me. At 5'6", with striking blonde hair and a curvy figure, she naturally attracted attention, especially from the athletes. She casually dated some of them, but nothing seemed serious. My chance to get to know her came when our professor divided us into groups for a project, and Cindy ended up in mine. Despite my initial hesitations about group work, as I'd dealt with unreliable teammates before, her presence completely changed my perspective. Cindy's goal was to become a school teacher and eventually move into educational administration. She explained that both of her parents had been teachers and later principals, and many of their former students spoke highly of them. Inspired by this, she wanted to follow in their footsteps. Her parents had always taught her that learning something new each day was essential, and I fully agreed, as it mirrored the lessons my parents had instilled in me. My family owned a small farm and had 6 kids. My parents were always looking for ways to save money. My father believed it was better to solve problems yourself than pay someone else to do it. Now, in college, I was learning as much as I could from my professors, and also figuring out how to pay for tuition. My parents couldn't afford my education, so I chose engineering because I was good at math and science, and it seemed like a practical path to support myself. I worked part-time tutoring for the city, putting in about 20 hours a week. Although I still needed student loans, the job helped reduce them. I had dreams of designing beautiful buildings, but over time, I let go of that dream and pursued a new one. But more on that later. I first met Cindy when we were put into the same group for a political science class project. I had noticed her on the first day, but never thought she would be interested in me. She was gorgeous, 5 and 6 inches with a curvy figure and long blonde hair. There was something about her that made everyone want to be around her. The athletes and cool guys always flocked to her. She dated a few of them, but never seemed serious with anyone. About halfway through the semester, our political science professor told us he was dividing the class into 5 groups of 6 for a project. At first, I was skeptical. I'd had bad experiences with group projects in high school where a couple of people usually slacked off. But when Cindy was assigned to my group, my attitude quickly changed. "Hi, I'm Cindy Brandon," she said, offering her hand. I'm Todd Anderson," I stammered. "You don't sound too sure of that," Cindy laughed. I didn't want to look dumb, so I quickly pulled out my wallet and glanced at my driver's license. No, I'm definitely Todd Anderson," I grinned, showing her my ID. She laughed, and from that moment, our relationship began. In political science, we had to dissect a famous Supreme Court case assigned by the professor. We were tasked with explaining the case, discussing the decision, and defending our opinion. We got Marbury v. Madison, the first major case where the Supreme Court issued a ruling that shaped its power. The decision established that the court couldn't become more powerful than the legislative or administrative branches, shaping it into what it is today. As it turned out, The other 4 members of our group were unreliable. 3 were on the soccer team, and the 4th dropped out just before the semester ended. Cindy and I ended up doing all the research and writing ourselves. I should have been annoyed, but I wasn't. I was thrilled to spend more time with Cindy. We clicked so well that we started dating and soon became exclusive. I didn't date much in high school or college since I didn't have much money, but that didn't matter to Cindy. She loved simple things like watching TV with me, taking walks, having picnics, or visiting museums. Those were our big dates. I fell hopelessly in love with Cindy, and she seemed just as in love with me. We got married right after graduation. The first 5 years of our marriage were mostly wonderful. Our home was small, but had everything we needed. And since we moved into a new neighborhood, we quickly made friends and enjoyed a fun social life. Cindy got a job teaching 8th grade at a middle school in northern Palm Beach County, and I started working for a major engineering firm in South Florida. However, over time, I realized I didn't enjoy engineering. As a junior engineer, I was stuck with the least interesting projects. To distract myself from the monotony, I enrolled in a master's program, hoping that once I earned my degree, my salary would increase, and I'd get more exciting assignments. But all I got for my efforts was a $500 bonus. I was disappointed, but thought, to hell with them. I'll keep working and aim for a PhD. Other than the dullness of my job, I couldn't complain much. Cindy's career was thriving, and we were deeply in love. Financially, we were stable, and we even began talking about having a baby. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. The first setback was when my boss informed me I was being transferred from the design department to inspections. Even though my design tasks were already boring, inspections were even worse. The second piece of news, which initially seemed positive, was that Cindy was moving to a new school, West Jupiter High, to lead the guidance department. However, that promotion would later prove to be a disaster. The final blow was the appointment of Brock Turner as principal of Cindy's school. Brock was a former NFL player, charismatic, and larger than life. At first, I was impressed by him. Having played 5 seasons for 3 different teams, he was drafted by Dallas in the 3rd round as an inside linebacker but was traded after 2 seasons, which was odd given his solid performance. After bouncing between Seattle and Philadelphia, a career-ending injury cut his NFL run short. Brock then tried his hand at television, but it didn't pan out. He briefly worked at a regional bank, but disliked the office job, so he left. Eventually, he took a position as a PE teacher and soccer coach near Philadelphia, rising to assistant principal and head coach. Though his team did okay, they never made the postseason. After 3 years, he applied for and got the job as principal at Cindy's school. At first, I talked about Brock more than Cindy. I was fascinated by his larger-than-life personality and NFL background, but that changed quickly after meeting him. I found him arrogant and self-centered. His wife, April, on the other hand, was the opposite, charming, intelligent, and a bit shy. She was also stunningly beautiful, reminding me of a smaller, more elegant Whitney Houston. I couldn't figure out what someone like April saw in a guy like Brock. Most of the staff at Cindy's school adored Brock, including my wife. I tried to warn Cindy that her boss was a womanizer, but she just laughed and teased me. "You're jealous," she said, hugging me. "Yeah, maybe I am. He's bigger than me, tougher than me, and he's an NFL star," I joked. "You don't have to be jealous," Cindy reassured me, pulling me close. "He may have played in the NFL, but I married you." Even though Cindy calmed me down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brock was trouble. He seemed to be everywhere, and despite my discomfort, Cindy dragged me to every school event, where we often found ourselves with Brock and April. At these gatherings, I had the chance to talk to April and learned more about her life. She was a part-time instructor at the local community college, teaching French and German, while pursuing a PhD in comparative studies, hoping to secure a full-time assistant professor role. As time passed, I noticed Brock becoming more brazen, especially around Cindy. Everything came to a head during a school district Christmas party. Brock asked Cindy to dance without even glancing at me to check if I was okay with it. They danced for 3 songs in a row, with Brock holding her a little too close for my liking. Meanwhile, I found myself deep in conversation with April, who shared stories about their young daughter, Tiffany. By the time Brock and Cindy returned, I hadn't realized how much time had passed. However, Brock's demeanor shifted when he saw me talking to April. "You're in my shoes," he growled at me. Shocked by his tone, I stood up and asked, "Can I get anyone a drink?" April smiled and asked for a Chardonnay, while Cindy requested a soda. As I returned with the drinks, Brock grabbed my arm and snatched the wine glass from my hand. "Stay away from my wife, or I'll kick your back," he muttered. "What's your problem, man?" I asked, shocked by his behavior. "Just stay the hell away from my wife, he said, turning away. A few minutes later, Brock suddenly announced that he and April were leaving. His declaration was abrupt, and Cindy looked at me, clearly confused. On the drive home, Cindy immediately confronted me. "What did you do to upset Brock?" she demanded. "I didn't do a damn thing," I replied, frustrated. "You must have done something," Cindy insisted. "He was really mad at you." "He threatened to knock me on my A if I didn't stay away from April. I was just being polite and keeping her company while you two were dancing without even checking if I was okay with it." "What's that supposed to mean?" Cindy asked, annoyed. "Forget it," I said through gritted teeth. "I'm done talking about Brock freaking Turner." After that Christmas party, my dislike for Brock turned into outright contempt. Still, I didn't want to stir up trouble, especially since he was Cindy's boss. Thankfully, after the incident, Cindy rarely brought up Brock. About 3 months after New Year's, the economy tanked, especially in the commercial and residential real estate sectors. At first, it didn't affect my company because we had plenty of work, but soon people started getting nervous as new orders stopped coming in. I kept my head down, knowing that layoffs would come if things didn't turn around. One day, Cindy came home excited. "I've been chosen to organize a career assembly at school." I didn't see why she was so thrilled, since the only thing that would excite the students was getting out of class for a few periods. Still, Cindy was overjoyed to be in charge, and I gave her my full support. If I had known Brock picked her for the task, I wouldn't have been as eager to help, but in the end, it was good that I did. Cindy had already lined up an accountant, a lawyer, a nurse, a computer programmer, and other professionals. Then she asked me, "Can you get someone from your firm to give a short presentation?" The next day I asked my supervisor, and after it was passed up the chain, I got the answer. "If you want to take a personal day, you can go." Since it was to help Cindy, I agreed. The assembly was set to last 2 hours, with 12 professionals given 10 minutes each to talk about their fields. However, on the day of the event, 4 speakers either canceled or didn't show up. Cindy was furious and nearly in tears. "Don't worry," I told her. "I'll cover for the accountant, lawyer, mechanic, and doctor." When my turn came, I kissed Cindy and reassured her, "Don't stress." As I walked onto the stage, I saw a crowd of high school students looking bored out of their minds. The only reason they hadn't left was that they'd have to go back to class. While my slides were being loaded, I started my presentation. "Good afternoon. If you're asleep, raise your hand." Sure enough, most hands went up, and the students laughed. I knew I had their attention. "I hope what I'm about to share interests you, but if not, at least it'll keep you out of class for a bit longer." The students clapped. Taking a deep breath, I began. "I'm an engineer, but I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 different professions. I'll also give you some tips on how to succeed in whatever you do, including how to finish high school with less stress." The students laughed again, but many sat up straighter. I was getting into a groove. "You probably think engineers are all nerds, but that's not true. Let me tell you a story about how practical engineers are." I then told my story. One day, an engineering student was riding his new bike across campus. He ran into a friend, also an engineer, who said, "Nice bike. Where'd you get it?" "Well, the weirdest thing happened," said the first student. "A girl rode up to me, got off her bike, stripped off all her clothes, and told me I could take whatever I wanted." "Wow," said the second student. "Good call. Her clothes probably wouldn't have fit you anyway." I added, "As you can see, engineers are practical." The room erupted in laughter. I then moved on to my slideshow, featuring unique buildings and structures. One building had a roof shaped like a rolled-up carpet. Another, called the Crooked House, looked like it leaned in several directions at once. I even showed a building shaped like a giant picnic basket. At the end of the slides, I displayed a 9-story building with no name and asked, "Can anyone guess what's special about this building?" After a few guesses, I finally said, "You'll never figure it out. This is the largest brothel in Europe. It's 9 stories tall and located in Germany, in case you were wondering." The boys cheered while the girls let out disgusted yucks at my comment. I kept going, moving from one profession to the next, explaining the average salary and required education for each. I mixed in jokes and gave tips on how to study and pass tests. "If you want to succeed at anything," I said, "you've got to push yourself beyond what you think you can do. It might sound counterintuitive, but if you don't challenge your limits, how can you ever improve?" The students seemed interested, so I continued. "There's no such thing as a stupid question. The only dumb thing is not asking for help when you need it." I also briefly addressed those not planning to go to college. "If you're considering a trade, go for it," I encouraged. You might even end up making more money than most college graduates. I was enjoying myself and didn't realize I'd gone over my time until Cindy gave me a frantic signal to wrap it up. Nodding, I closed with one last piece of advice. As you go through life, each of you will have to give a public speech at some point. It's one of the biggest fears people have, sometimes even bigger than the fear of end. When that time comes, remember, stand up straight so people can see you, speak loudly so they can hear you, and keep it short so they can appreciate you. Thank you. You've been great, I finished. To my surprise, I got a standing ovation. Cindy kissed me and Brock awkwardly patted my hand, but it didn't stop there. 3 principals from other schools approached me, asking if I could give a similar speech at their schools. I explained, I took a personal day to speak here, and I did it to help my wife. Cindy, however, convinced me to speak at the other schools. Each went well, and after the last one, at a high school in a poorer area, the principal offered me a teaching job. At the time, I felt on top of the world, but soon that feeling would fade. One Monday morning, my supervisor called me into his office. "We're making cuts," he said, "and unfortunately your position is being eliminated." The severance package was fair, including 3 months' pay and health insurance. But when I told Cindy, her first reaction was, "Great, how are we going to pay the mortgage now?" I just stared at her and said, "Thanks for the encouragement." I grabbed a beer from the fridge and went to the den, where I started job hunting on the computer. A few minutes later, Cindy came in looking apologetic. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm just scared we might lose the house." I kissed her forehead. "Don't worry, I've got 3 months of severance. I'll find something before it runs out." But as my severance ran out, I still hadn't found a job, and the pressure from Cindy kept building. With each rejection, the tension at home grew, and I started feeling more like a failure. Then something happened that made things worse. Alan Latter, the vice principal at West Jupiter High, took a job in California and left in 2 weeks. Brock quickly promoted Cindy to take his place. From that moment on, I had to endure constant talk about how Mr. Turner was beloved by the students, praised by the teachers, and even being considered for deputy superintendent. My dislike for Brock hit its peak as my unemployment dragged into the 4th month. I couldn't shake the feeling that Cindy was losing respect for me. But then, an unexpected opportunity came up. One evening, while watching the news, I saw a story about a new program aimed at recruiting teachers for low-income schools. The program focused on candidates' life experience rather than requiring a teaching certificate, though new hires would need to get certified within 2 years. The starting salary was $3,000 higher than normal for new teachers. Since I hadn't found work in my field, I decided to give it a shot. The next morning, I faxed my resume to the school board, and by noon, I had an interview set for the following day. I didn't tell Cindy because I didn't want to get her hopes up. The interview went well, and to my surprise, I got a job offer. As soon as my resume hit the system, they found a video of one of my career day speeches, which fast-tracked my application. They offered me a job at Riviera High School, the worst-performing school in the district, located in the economically struggling Riviera Beach area. Despite the town's fancy name, it was anything but upscale. Worst of all, Riviera High ranked last out of 58 high schools in the county, with only 6% of its seniors being college-ready. Still, I accepted the job to teach math and science. That evening, I excitedly told Cindy about my new position, expecting her support. Instead, she looked horrified. "I don't want you taking that job," she said. "It's too dangerous." She shared horror stories about the school, metal detectors at every entrance, guards patrolling the halls, and 3 teachers being attacked the previous year, with one even stabbed. "You don't know anything about teaching," she added. "You won't last a week." Despite Cindy's warnings and the frightening stories from other teachers, I showed up nervous but determined on my first day. The school's condition didn't ease my nerves. It was an old, poorly maintained building with graffiti covering parts of the outside and even the interior walls. Students wandered the halls like they owned the place, and security guards were posted near every restroom. I decided to keep a low profile at first, avoiding conflict and focusing on simple math and science games. The games were fun, but they also taught the students the key concepts they needed to pass their tests. By the end of the year, the school's academic performance had improved slightly, thanks in part to Principal Ben Carlson, a no-nonsense figure with a commanding presence, who maintained order with strict policies. Not only did I survive the first week, but by December, I was thriving. I revamped my lesson plans to include more engaging games, which the students loved. Other teachers began using some of my methods, and by the end of the year, Riviera High improved its ranking from 58th to 51st in the county. I was even nominated for Teacher of the Year, though I didn't win. Despite these successes, Cindy wasn't impressed. She kept asking when I'd stop wasting time and get back into engineering. Finally, I told her, I'm not going back to engineering. I love teaching. She wasn't thrilled, but seemed to reluctantly accept my decision. During the Christmas break, I made a big choice. I decided to pursue a PhD, something I hadn't been able to do because of the downturn in the economy. I wasn't as interested in engineering anymore, but I'd always been passionate about computers. So I set my sights on a PhD in computer science. I remembered from a conversation with April nearly a year earlier that she was working toward a PhD in comparative studies at Florida Atlantic University, FAU. I looked into FAU's programs and decided to enroll in their computer engineering PhD program. I spent another year teaching at Riviera High School, where the academic scores improved further, raising the school's rank from 51st to 46th in the county. Meanwhile, the school board approved Cindy's appointment as vice principal at West Jupiter High School. But then everything changed. That summer, Brock was promoted to deputy superintendent, and Cindy was nominated to become the principal of West Jupiter High. I was relieved that Brock's new role meant his office would be at district headquarters, so Cindy wouldn't see him daily, though she still had to make weekly trips there. I wasn't happy about it, but I understood it was part of her job. At the same time, I continued attending classes at FAU, which was about 40 minutes away. Since April also attended FAU, I offered to carpool with her. She thought it was a great idea, but when she told Brock, he became furious. He even called me, threatening, "If you ever drive my wife anywhere, I'll kick your A." I didn't expect such hostility, but I was disappointed because I enjoyed talking with April during the commute. Despite Brock's jealousy, April and I became good friends over the months. We often grabbed coffee together during breaks between classes. Most of the time, we were joined by other classmates, but occasionally it was just the two of us. Our conversations grew deeper, covering everything from our studies to personal challenges. One evening after class, I was sitting in the cafeteria when April arrived with a few classmates. I had already bought her a coffee, knowing she'd be there soon. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "You didn't have to do that, Jacob." "No problem," I said with a grin. "I've been here for about 15 minutes, and I figured your class would be out soon." April sat down and took a sip of her coffee. "Your class ended early?" "Yeah," I replied. "The teacher got sick." April was quiet for a moment, then opened up. "I envy you, Jacob. I should be further along in my PhD by now, but Brock hasn't made it easy for me. Now he's pressuring me to have another baby in hopes of having a boy. But if I do, it'll set my PhD back by years. I wouldn't have a shot at landing a full-time position as an assistant professor." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him I wouldn't have another baby until I got my doctorate. He wasn't happy," she said, glancing at her phone. "Damn, my phone's dead. I need to let Brock know I'm staying late to meet with my counselor." "Do you really think that's a good idea?" I asked carefully. April thought for a second, then sighed. "You're right. No point in poking the bear." She borrowed a phone from one of her classmates, Amy, and after a short call with Brock, she hung up, muttering, "Damn." "Everything okay?" I asked. "No," she said, frustrated. "His voicemail is full again. I've been telling him for days to clear it out, but he hasn't." "Need me to do anything?" I offered. April hesitated, then pulled out a note from her backpack. "Would you mind dropping this off at my house? Just tell Brock I tried to call, but his voicemail is full, and I asked you to deliver this." Although I wasn't eager to visit Brock, I agreed. "Sure, I'll do it." As I turned onto Turner Street, where Brock lived, I was surprised to see Cindy's Volkswagen parked in his driveway. I couldn't think of any reason why Cindy would be there, and my mind started racing with unsettling possibilities. I parked on the street, feeling a growing sense of unease. I tried to convince myself there was a logical explanation for Cindy being there, but nothing reasonable came to mind. I decided to take a look around the house. The lights were on downstairs, and most of the windows didn't have curtains drawn. I slowly made my way to the side of the house and peeked into the first window. It was the living room, but no one was there. The next room I checked was the kitchen, which was also empty. However, when I rounded the back of the house, I found a window with partially open curtains. What I saw inside shook me to my core. Brock and my wife Cindy were in an embrace that left no doubt about what was going on. In that moment, I had the presence of mind to pull out my phone and start recording. I watched the scene unfold, feeling paralyzed, unable to move or think clearly. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled back to my car and drove to a nearby parking lot. There, I screamed in anguish, pounding the steering wheel in rage. "How could Cindy betray me like this?" I yelled repeatedly. We had talked about having kids, and now here she was, cheating on me with the man I despised most. As the initial shock wore off, my anger grew like never before. I knew my marriage was over. The only question was how much pain I could inflict on them both. I had the video, but I knew it wouldn't matter if they truly loved each other. Revenge, however, was all I could think about at that moment. Then my thoughts turned to April. I remembered Brock bragging once that if they ever divorced, he'd leave her with nothing. I felt a strong urge to warn her. Without hesitation, I drove back to FAU, determined to tell her everything. When I arrived on campus, I spotted April's car still in the parking lot. I waited anxiously until she came out about 10 minutes later. The moment she saw me, she looked concerned. "Jacob, what's wrong?" she asked, clearly sensing my distress. "Did something happen to Brock or Tiffany?" I shook my head. "No, April. Physically, they're fine, but I have something difficult to tell you." Her expression turned confused. "What is it?" "Your husband," I began, my voice heavy with emotion. "And my wife. They're having an affair." April's face went pale, and her tone sharpened. "That's not funny, Jacob." "I'm not joking," I said gravely. "I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, and videotaped it." April's hands started trembling, and she dropped her bag and purse to the ground. I picked them up for her and gently said, "We need to talk. I need to show you this." I led her to my car, pulled out my phone, and played the video. April didn't make it through the whole recording before she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I knelt beside her, taking the phone from her shaking hands. "I know this is a lot to take in," I said softly, "but I've already made up my mind. I'm divorcing Cindy. From what Brock said during the video, it sounds like he's planning to hide his assets before divorcing you." April looked confused. "I didn't hear that," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll play it again," I replied. This time, as she watched, April's shock turned to fury. "I've heard rumors about Brock over the years, but I never believed them. If he thinks he's going to run off with your wife and leave me behind, he's got another thing coming." April realized what she had said and quickly apologized. "I'm sorry for that comment about your wife." "It's okay. You just called it like it is," I replied. After making sure April was okay with going home, I sent her a copy of the video. Then I headed home myself. By the time I got there, Cindy was either asleep or pretending to be. I didn't care. I went to the den, turned on my computer, and started planning the end of my marriage. The next day, after Cindy left around 8:30 a.m., I'd already showered and was ready to sort out our finances. Before heading out, I found a divorce attorney online and scheduled an appointment for the following day. Cindy and I didn't have many assets. Our house had little equity, so it would either be sold or she could buy me out. We had joint accounts totaling about $75,000 and 2 retirement accounts, Cindy's with the Florida retirement system and mine, a 401k. Until recently, our retirement funds had been about equal. I figured splitting everything would be straightforward, but I'd have to wait until I talked to the attorney. I already knew Florida was a no-fault state, so the video wouldn't help legally, but it might pressure Cindy to sign the divorce papers if she wanted to fight. By 10 a.m., I had packed up what I could and started looking for an apartment. I found a studio in Lake Park and rented it. Afterward, I went home to finish packing my belongings. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I realized the studio wouldn't hold all my stuff, so I rented a nearby storage unit. If Cindy noticed my things were disappearing, she didn't say a word. I stayed in the den, preparing for a potential new job. I slept on the couch while Cindy left the house before I woke up. The next day, I met with the divorce attorney, Alicia Smithson. She was a no-nonsense woman who didn't tolerate excuses. After I explained what was happening and showed her the video, she confirmed that the footage wouldn't help in court. She also warned me not to post it online, saying I could face legal trouble if I did. That evening, I waited for Cindy to come home, wanting to confront her. She rushed in around 9 p.m. and brushed past me as I sat in the living room. "Cindy, we need to talk," I called out. "I'm tired, and I want a shower," she said, heading upstairs. "I need to talk to you right now," I shouted, which made her freeze at the foot of the stairs. She turned and demanded, "What the hell are you talking about?" "Come here, and I'll show you," I said, standing up. Cindy cautiously walked into the living room. "I think you owe me an apology for how you just spoke to me," I said. When she didn't respond, I opened my laptop and played the video. She only watched a few seconds before slamming the lid shut. "I guess now that you've found out, I don't have to hide it anymore," Cindy said without a trace of remorse. I chuckled. "Cindy, remember when you said people should learn something new every day?" "Yeah, so what?" she snapped. "Well, apparently you didn't learn when I warned you about Brock. Now he's made you his plaything." "There's no need to be so blunt," Cindy said angrily. "I know it hurts your ego, but a better man took me from you. I was hoping we could part as friends." I laughed out loud. "Since you refuse to see the truth, you're on your own. I've already rented an apartment and moved most of my things there. You can stay in this house until the divorce. It'll either be sold or you can buy me out. You'll be served with papers at work on Friday." I moved into my small, cramped apartment. When you love someone as much as I loved Cindy, it's devastating. The first couple of days I could barely get out of bed, only forcing myself up to use the bathroom or find something to eat. Thankfully, it was summer, and I didn't have anywhere to be. My mind was consumed with thoughts of how to get back at them both, but I couldn't think of anything. By the third day, I forced myself to get up, take a shower, and go grocery shopping. When I got back, I turned on the small TV in the kitchen, and a celebrity scandal show immediately caught my attention. Former NFL halfback Brock Turner and his wife are divorcing after 3 years of marriage. Rumors of Brock being a womanizer were confirmed when his wife, April, filed for divorce citing infidelity. Our reporter spoke with Mr. Turner today. "Mr. Turner, is it true your wife caught you with another woman?" Brock smiled sadly. "My wife and I are going through a tough time. We're working through a misunderstanding, and we'd appreciate privacy as we try to strengthen our marriage." I didn't feel much satisfaction. I hadn't spoken to April since finding out what her husband was doing with my wife. It seemed unfair that Brock had ruined my marriage, and for all I knew, he and April were reconciling. I felt anger and sadness again, but when the phone rang, fear set in. Before I could say hello, Brock started. "Listen, fool, I know you're the one who took those pictures of me with my promiscuous wife. Just so you know, I'm living in your house and entertaining her. Watch the 6 o'clock news tonight because your A is grass." I was shocked Brock had called me, but it didn't take a genius to figure out I'd made the video. As intimidating as he was, I wasn't going to let him know he scared me. "Well, you're in luck because Cindy will soon be my ex-wife," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "And if you're living there, I guess you didn't resolve that misunderstanding. Just watch the 6 o'clock news, you fool. You won't be so smug after that," he snapped before hanging up. I wondered what Brock could possibly do to me and turned on the local news at 6. About 10 minutes in, the anchor announced, "Palm Beach County Superintendent Standish Crawford resigned today to take a position with the Department of Education. Deputy Superintendent Brock Turner has been named interim superintendent, with speculation that the position will be offered to him permanently." A cold fear gripped me. Now I understood what Brock meant. He was my boss. As superintendent, he could make my life miserable, or worse, set me up for some scandal. I needed to get out from under his control. At first, I considered quitting and going back to engineering, but the economy was just starting to improve, and I needed income to pay my bills and divorce attorney. Cindy's lawyer made outrageous demands, like insisting I buy out half her share of the house for $50,000. If there had been $20,000 in equity, it would have been a great deal, and I'd be entitled to half. She also demanded I drop infidelity as a reason for divorce and accused me of hiding money, requesting I pay for a forensic accountant to investigate our finances. Despite how ridiculous it all was, I still had to pay Alicia, my attorney, to defend me. Panic set in until I remembered April mentioning the college where she worked was still looking for adjunct faculty. I immediately called the college's HR department, who directed me to their website to apply. After reviewing my qualifications, they hired me to teach algebra, pre-calculus, and calculus on a 1-year contract at about 80% of my high school salary. Teaching at the college turned out to be much more rewarding than high school. At the high school, it always felt like I was trying to come up with new ways to engage students who didn't care about their futures. At the college, the students genuinely wanted to learn, and if I made it interesting, they eagerly participated. 2 weeks into the job, I ran into April in the cafeteria. She seemed just as happy to see me as I was to see her. We had lunch together and caught up. April told me that Brock was dragging out their divorce, even filing for sole custody of their daughter, Tiffany. However, the video of him with my wife convinced the judge he wasn't fit for primary custody. "My divorce is taking forever, too," I admitted, "but it looks like it's finally nearing the end." April pushed her sandwich aside. I still can't believe I bought into Brock's lies for so long, she said, shaking her head. He has a way of making everything sound so believable. He must be one hell of a talker to convince my wife to get involved with him, I said bitterly. Cindy always said people should learn something new every day. I could have done without that lesson. April squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry this happened to you, Todd. You're one of the kindest people I know. From that day, April and I started having lunch together regularly, which eventually led to dinners and other dates. I found myself falling for her, but I didn't want to risk ruining our friendship. Still, I wanted more. One day over lunch, I took a chance. There's a circus in town this weekend, I said casually. I was thinking of going. I was planning to take Tiffany, but she might not be up for it, April replied sadly. She still doesn't understand why her daddy doesn't want to see her. He told me that if I go through with the divorce, he'll pay child support, but won't have anything to do with her. No offense, but Brock is a Class A idiot, I said with venom, then smiled gently. But if you want to go, I'm sure the two of us can talk a 4-year-old into it. The day at the circus was a huge success. There wasn't just the circus. There was also a small fair. By the end of the day, April was holding one of my hands. Tiffany had a firm grip on the other, and with her free hand, she clutched a stuffed unicorn I had won for her. When we got to their house, I walked them to the door and leaned in to kiss April on the cheek. To my surprise, she pulled me in and kissed me on the lips. I wrapped my arms around her and kissed her back. As we pulled away, I felt a tug on my pants. I want a kiss too, Tiffany demanded, lifting her arms to me. I picked her up and kissed her cheeks. Thank you for letting me come with you and your mom today, I said, and thank you for being such a good girl. Tiffany beamed at the praise. As I was about to set her down, April asked, Do you want to stay for dinner? It's nothing fancy, just Tiffany's favorite, spaghetti. I love spaghettis, I said, still holding Tiffany, and I'd love to have dinner with you lovely ladies. Dinner was lively. Tiffany got more tomato sauce on her face and hands than in her mouth, giggling every time she slurped a noodle. Afterward, she took a bath and then asked me to read her a story. I ended up reading 2, using different voices for all the characters, which she loved. She refused to go to bed without a goodnight kiss. Once Tiffany was asleep, April and I sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking about work. Suddenly, she set down her glass, took mine, and placed it on the table. What happened next was inevitable. We got closer, and one thing led to another. From that night on, we grew very close, but we decided not to move in together until both of our divorces were final. My divorce was finalized first. I felt relieved when the final court date arrived. I was in the courtroom when Cindy walked in, arm in arm with Brock. She smiled smugly at me, gripping his hand tightly, while he smirked, especially after kissing her before taking his seat. I'd convinced April to stay away, knowing Brock would be there. The judge simply asked both lawyers if everything was settled, and when they agreed, he banged the gavel. Just like that, I was divorced. April's divorce took nearly 3 more months to finalize, but during that time, we both earned our doctorates. Shortly after, April was promoted to associate professor. Although I wasn't offered a full faculty position, I was given a 2-year teaching contract, the first of its kind at the college, where they had never offered more than a 1-year contract. My classes had become so popular that there was now a waiting list, and I was even asked to teach an additional pre-calculus course due to demand. I was earning 25% more than I had as a high school teacher and had been promised an assistant professor position in the near future. Things were going better than I had ever imagined. But April and I faced a turning point when I had to attend a 3-day seminar in Atlanta. The sessions ran all day, with only 5-minute breaks every hour. In the evenings, there were group discussions that went late into the night. By the time each day ended, I was exhausted, collapsing into bed and starting over the next morning. I had explained the schedule to April, and she understood, but Tiffany didn't. She couldn't grasp why I hadn't called or why I had disappeared. When I finally returned, she practically jumped on me the moment I walked in the door, crying because I had left. I tried to explain where I had been, but she didn't calm down until I gave her a pink stuffed dragon I had brought back for her. One of her favorite books was about rainbow dragons, and her favorite character was the pink one named Pinky. When I gave her the dragon, she squealed with joy and covered my face with kisses. Once Tiffany had calmed down, we sat for dinner. Out of nowhere, she turned to me and asked, "Why don't you live here? I want you to be my daddy." I glanced at April, who was smiling, and replied, "I'd love to be your daddy, but I don't know what your mom would say about that." April, still smiling, added, Her mom would say she'd be thrilled if you became Tiffany's dad. But there's a catch. You have to become my husband first. Really? I asked, surprised. You're going to marry me? I thought you'd never ask. April giggled. We were married in a small ceremony with just a few close friends, my dad and April's mom. My mother had passed away when I was 9, and April's father had died when she was 15. I was happier than I had ever been. Sure, Cindy was with a former NFL player, but I had married the most beautiful woman I had ever known, and I now had a little girl I loved like my own. Throughout the divorce, Brock kept pursuing April, swinging between pleading and making veiled threats. However, he never crossed the line where the police could intervene. He was still living with Cindy, and from what I heard, she was over the moon. I almost felt sorry for her because eventually, Brock's true colors would show. When Cindy betrayed me, I was devastated and filled with rage, consumed by thoughts of revenge. But as I grew closer to April, those feelings faded. The desire for revenge disappeared. Yet fate had a way of giving me the upper hand. Shortly after April and I got married, we decided to sell her house and buy a new one closer to the college. We thought we'd try selling it ourselves, and within days, we were lucky enough to go under contract. Since Brock's name was still on the deed, he had to sign the contract. When April called him, he was thrilled to hear from her at first. But when she explained why she was calling, his mood shifted. Brock outright refused to sign the contract, being his usual stubborn self. April was ready for this. She calmly informed Brock that if he didn't want to sell the house, he'd have to buy her out according to their divorce settlement. Furious, he hung up the phone. However, the next day, Brock called back and grudgingly agreed to sign the contract. At the closing, April asked if he needed anything from the house. His response was cold. I don't need anything. It's your problem to get the crap out. Clearing out the house turned into a massive job. We saved the basement for last, and that's where I struck gold. April brought up a box filled with what looked like junk, but at the bottom was an old laptop that had belonged to Brock. April explained that he had gotten a new laptop a couple of years after becoming principal at West Jupiter High, so she assumed he had discarded this one. April asked if I could fix it up for Tiffany to use, and I told her it shouldn't be a problem as long as it still worked. That night, after charging it, I was surprised to find that not only did the laptop work, but it was also full of files. I considered just reformatting it, but I figured it would be smart to check if there were any files April might want, like pictures of her and Tiffany. What I found, however, elevated Brock from a typical idiot to a world-class one. There were some pictures and videos of April and Tiffany, but there were far more of other women. Brock had meticulously organized these videos and photos, each labeled with a description of how he rated the woman. Most of the women were strangers to me, but 5 of them I recognized. One was the wife of a Dallas quarterback, a world-famous model. Not long after their encounter, that couple had split up, and Brock was traded soon after. Now I knew why. The other 4 women were teachers at West Jupiter High, and 2 of them were married. Yes, Cindy was one of them. There were multiple photos and videos of her, some far worse than the one I had taken. I couldn't believe how my loving wife had turned into such a person. What made me laugh, though, was Brock's notes about Cindy. He praised her for her skills, but complained she was too clingy, constantly begging him to get her pregnant. He even considered doing it just to spite me. Initially, I planned to delete everything, but then I realized this was my chance for a bit of revenge. So I downloaded all the incriminating files onto a flash drive and continued combing through the laptop. What I found next was even more shocking. Brock's financial records. He hadn't disclosed all his assets during the divorce. He had accounts in the Cayman Islands and California that weren't mentioned in the court documents. After going through the rest of the files, I called April over. First, I showed her the pictures of the women Brock had slept with, then his hidden financial records. I wasn't sure what angered her more, the women or the money. In the end, I think it was the women. Among them were her maid of honor, close girlfriends, and even her cousin. April was livid. She took Brock back to court for hiding marital assets. He could have faced jail time, but instead, the judge awarded her 65% of the hidden assets. A large chunk of that money went into a college fund for Tiffany, and the rest went toward a down payment on a new house 2 blocks from the college. With the divorce settlement and my minimal living expenses, I was able to save a decent amount. Combined with what I got from my divorce, I matched April's down payment on the new house. As for Brock's treasure trove of incriminating files, I hadn't yet decided what to do with his top 10 entertainment picks, but I kept the flash drive, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during a college fair at the convention center in West Palm Beach. I was one of the speakers, and April had canceled her classes to join me. The event featured around 40 colleges, with high school students from all over the area bussed in to meet with representatives. There were also seminars on applying to college, choosing majors, and academic success. I was sitting with our college rep when I heard a voice that made my blood boil. Brock Turner. "Look over here, Cindy," he said, smirking. "There's your loser ex-husband." "That's funny, Brock," I replied with a forced smile, "because that's exactly what your ex-wife says about you." "You're such an a-hole, Todd," Brock spat, his face reddening. "You're lucky I don't—" "Ignore him, Brock," Cindy interrupted, taking his hand. "He's not half the man you are. Don't stoop to his level." Brock gave her a smug look and then leaned down to kiss her. She melted into his embrace, and when they pulled apart, he shot me a victorious grin. That's when I made my decision. As they turned to leave, I called out to Cindy, "Cindy, I found some pictures of you on an old computer. Thought you might want them. You always said people should learn something new every day." I handed her the flash drive. She muttered a quick thank you, unaware of what she now held. April had witnessed the entire exchange. She walked over to me, wrapped her arms around me, and kissed me softly. "I'm sorry I've been gone so long, honey," she said sweetly. "What the hell?" Brock blurted out, his face a mix of confusion and fury. His expression worsened when he noticed April's pregnant belly. "Oh, hi, Brock," April greeted him mockingly. "Catching up with my husband?" Brock stepped toward me, but quickly thought better of it as a guard walked by. He muttered something under his breath and stormed off with Cindy, glancing back at me several times, looking worried. That night, as April and I lay in bed, I gently rubbed lotion on her growing belly while we half listened to the news. We weren't paying much attention until the newscaster started a new story. The police were called to Superintendent Brock Turner's home this evening. While details are still emerging, it appears Mr. Turner sustained a non-life-threatening stab wound. His girlfriend, Cindy Albee, has been taken into custody. I looked at April with a grin. I guess Cindy learned something new today.